starting with 14, which was all math. We're going to go through every single one of those math problems together. Howdy, howdy. Nice. Thank you for the greeting. Appreciate it. Let me share my screen. That will help. There we go. I got my son this watch that hey, how you guys doing? Welcome back. Feeling better? Okay, good. I'm happy to hear that. So I had this dream, this reoccurring dream where I lost my kids. Like I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, or they're like out somewhere and then something happens. Dreams you don't want to have. And as the worried parent that I was, I went into the T-Mobile store and I bought these Sync Up Kids watches, which connect to cell phone service, and you can have parental controls on it and so forth. But now my kids can send text messages to an approved list. I can set the list of who they can contact and so forth, but I'm on that contact list. So I get voicemails from my 5-year-old, and he's like, "What are you doing?" You know, it's like, send me random messages, voice messages. Stop sending me stuff. And he's like calling all those relatives and everything. Anyhow, it's good stuff. What's going on here? Okay, there we go. Don't know why I did that. Oh, because connecting to the TV screen. All right, we have some questions. Unit 14, Unit 18. We're going to start with 14, which was all math. And we're going to begin with question number 5. If we already completed a particular question in class, then there's no need to go through it unless you have a question about it, of course. But we're going to go through every single one of these questions step by step so you're more familiar with how it works. But you don't benefit from today's session, the review session, unless you actually challenge yourself by doing these questions independently, getting an answer, being prepared for today's class. So, question number 5. Yes, step out. No, you're good right there. I know you're messing with me. We talked about it, right? We talked about that. But anyhow, here we go. What I notice about the math questions on your exam, usually the last 10 questions are math, right? If you read out the last sentence, it usually reveals the formula that you need to solve the problem. It doesn't work every single time, but the majority of the time, it's pretty darn accurate. Even look at this question, question number 5. Look at the last sentence. What does it say? Or the question. So immediately, if you read out the last sentence, it reveals the formula that is to be applied to solve this problem. You need the sales commission formula. Hey, so you can take out your handout for calculation of sales commission and have it in front of you with a calculator, of course, because we're running through calculations. Separate sheet of paper, something to write with, or whatever notes you took to solve this problem. So that way we can see if we made mistakes or it confirms the steps that we use to solve the problem. Either way, let me read out this question. A broker lists a motel for $1,450,000. A listing contract specifies 6.5% sale commission for the first 600,000 of the selling price. 7% is awarded for the next 800,000 on top of that. And if you sell the motel for anything over 1.4 million, you receive an additional 8%. Anything over 1.4. What we're describing here is step commissions, where you're paid on different levels or tiers of commission. I mentioned that you would encounter a question like this to challenge yourself with, work on it independently, get me an answer so we can go through it together. But the formula is still the same as straight commission, where you receive a straight percentage of commission off of your sale, like selling that house in Windermere. That is the example we used yesterday. Anyhow, the broker agrees to a 45-55 split if the property is sold by one of the broker's associates. The property is sold in-house. The broker pays the associate in the transaction 55% of total commissions. What is a sales associate's commission if they sell the motel for the listed sale price? We can take out our handouts once again for calculation of sale commission. It's right here. Looks like this, and it's step commissions specifically. Let's go ahead and plug in what we know. Do we know what the total selling price is? What did they sell this motel for? 1,450,000. Okay, so you guys are with me on that. That was the sale price. So we'll set that to the side for just a moment. But they go on by saying for the first $600,000 of that amount, within this amount, you receive how much? Exactly. They say 6.5%. You could do the math on that. Or you can multiply, convert it to a decimal, 0.065, same difference. You should be able to do that independently, but you did the math and you got what, 39,000? $39,000. They continue by saying for the next $800,000 of that amount, well, the question remains, if I can get your attention, if you add those two figures together, 600 plus 800, are you still within the total sale price? Yeah. So you do hit the next tier, right? And they said for that next tier, what percent? 7%. So you simply multiply ABC, right? Multiply across, and you get 56,000. Okay. So here's where you got to pay attention. They said if you sell the motel for anything over 1.4 million, I'll show you right here in this section. We know that the motel was sold for what? 1,450,000. But they said if you sell for anything over 1.4 million, which we know we did, that's the amount that's going to get plugged into here. So go ahead and subtract. Take 1,450,000, subtract 1.4 million. What do you get? You get $50,000. And they said on that 50,000, you receive what percent? 8%. You understand how we got the 50,000, right? You multiply by 8%. What is that? 4,000. Now you have to add up the total commissions. Add up these three figures and tell me what you get. I would agree with that. So you got 99,000. We're going to plug that amount into here and utilize for this calculation. 99,000 is total commission, right? Total commission. And they said the associate receives 55. Yep. So all you had to do is multiply by 55%. And yes, you got the correct answer, which is $54,450. Is that one of our choices? You understand how we got this result? Did I lose anybody in this explanation? Does it make a little bit more sense now as we go through it? Did they include 99 as one of your choices? Yep. They prepare for you guys making this mistake. So yeah, correct answer is B as in Bravo, 54,450. All right, let's move on to number 6. Look at the last sentence. What is the builder's percentage of loss? So immediately we know it's the profit or loss formula. I don't think we're going to do any more sales commission calculations, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, there is one other one, excuse me. But we can take out our handouts for a calculation of profit or loss. And let me read out this question. A builder purchases a residential lot for $42,000, constructs a new house at a cost of $178,000. The builder later sells the property for $187,000. What is the loss? So we know it's going to be a loss. That means you sold it for less than what you bought it for. But let's go ahead and plug in to this handout. We remember this handout, I'm sure of it. If you know what you paid for it, your cost, and what you sold it for, we can easily calculate the rate of return. We then use rate of return to find out the profit or loss, depending on what they're asking you for. So what did he pay for this property? Exactly. How do we figure this out? Well, $42,000 for the lot, plus how much for the land or the building? 178. So when you add those two figures together, you should get total exactly 220,000. That was the total cost. What did he sell it for? 187. So now it's making sense, right? Do the math. Isolate, rate of return, slide, divide. Works every single time. And tell me what you get. Exactly. You take 187,000 divided by 220,000. And the result of that, the rate of return is going to be 0.85, which is how much percent? 85%, because it's expressed as a percentage, not in decimal form. But that's not your loss. What this is telling us is that this builder got 85% of their money back when they sold it, which means they didn't break what? Even. What is breaking even as a percentage? Yeah, getting at least 100% of your money back. That's breaking even, but they fell short. 100% would have been breaking even, got 85% return, which means the loss, the actual loss was 15%, and that's the correct answer. Now be careful on your exam because they will include 85% as one of your choices. You can count on that for your exams. And you can easily get confused because you go through this first step, you get 85%, you're thinking, oh, that's got to be the loss. No, that's the rate of return. But we use that to figure out the loss. Let's go ahead and mark that as the correct answer. 15%. B is in Bravo. 7. You bought a house in Citrus, Florida for $130,000, gave it a deposit of $19,480, assumed a recorded mortgage of $90,520, and signed a new second mortgage and note for $20,000. What are the total state taxes due as a result of this transfer of property? You could take out this handout. State taxes related to the finance and purchase of real property. And I can just tell you, based on the information provided, we're going to have to use all three calculations. Don't assume that when you take your exam, you're going to have to use all three. You need to know all three just in case they throw one at you or all of them, but they're individual calculations, and that's what you see in your textbook. That's what you highlighted. Class exam question like 96 or whatever it was. Anyhow, no, that's a different question. Excuse me. That's for Homestead. So the question I have for you is there a new loan involved in this transaction? Newly created loan. Do they tell us in the question? Yeah, of how much? 20,000, exactly. New second loan of 20,000. So we plug it in. Is there any other new loan? New. The answer is no. There's no other new loan. It's just a $20,000 new loan. And that means we can calculate the intangible tax by multiplying by this rate that does not change, 2 mils, 0.002. And what do you get? Did you get 40? Confirm. 20,000 times 0.002. Everybody should have their calculators out in front of them, participate. $40. So that's the intangible tax. But remember, anytime we have a new loan, how many taxes must we pay on new loans? 2. The tax on new loans and the tax that exists for all loans, which include new and existing. So yes, you have to take that new loan and plug it in to get tax for the second time. And we also have to account for any other loans that are involved in this transaction. Is there any other loan involved here? Of what? 90,520. What do we know about stamp taxes? And there's a note here: when calculating stamp taxes, all amounts less than what? A $100 bill must be rounded up to 100. Is $20 less than a $100 bill? Yes, it is. So it changes this amount to 90,000 what? 600. Do you understand why? That $20 gets rounded up to 100. It's not how you normally round and what you learn in school. This is different. This is state taxes. State of Florida says if you have anything less than a $100 bill, even 1 penny, you have to round it up to 100 so we could charge you taxes on it. That's how they operate. It's unfortunate. So it's not like what you learn in school. Oh, if I'm rounding up to 100, it doesn't have to be 50 and up. Not for this case. Go ahead and do the math. You can add those two figures together, 20,000 plus 90,520, and you get 110,000. Well, actually, it's 90,600, right? You get 110,600. This is the way I like to do it. You can multiply them individually by the tax rate, but I like to add them beforehand and then multiply. Just it feels like I'm saving a step. So you add these two figures together, you get 110,600. You multiply it by this rate. These rates don't change. Multiply by 0.0035 or 3.5 mils. And yes, you get 387.10. And now we have to account for the state taxes for transfer of the deed. There is a transfer of real property involved here. And the way to calculate this tax is based on the purchase price. Luckily, in the question, they just come out and say the purchase price is X amount of dollars. What was that dollar figure? 130. That's the amount we needed. Do we care about the down payment? No, that's part of the purchase price. It's already included. So are the loans. And there's nothing less than a $100 bill. You don't have to round anything. You can just multiply across. And you'll get 910. Is that right? 910. When you add those three figures together, it should give you your result, what you're looking for, the answer for this question. So add those three figures. Add 910 and add 40. And you should get 1,337 and 10 cents. Does that match up with one of our choices? Yeah, so it would be D is in delta. Just like we have in our calculator, 1,337 and 10. Any questions? All right, number 8.
Question.
A broker lists a property. 7. Yes, question.
For step number 2, how did you get 90,520? I know you have to multiply it by 2 because it's new and existing.
Right here.
Oh, gotcha.
You have an existing loan of 90,520,
Got it.
and you have to pay state taxes when you're taking over somebody's debt, even though it's not a newly originated loan. And that's a little bit odd, right? Because you're thinking, well, when the loan was created, somebody paid taxes. So why are we paying taxes again if it's just being assumed? It's a little bit silly, but they want their tax, right? So anyhow, correct answer was D as in Delta. Number 8, a broker lists a property, 7% commission is agreed to, listing is placed in the MLS. Actually, let me close out to get some bandwidth here. Boop. All right. The sale commission is to be split as follows: 45% to the listing broker, 55% to the selling broker. The selling broker is the buyer's side. But I'm pretty sure in the next version of the textbook, because of this NAR settlement, it's going to be changed. And they said MLS, so it would have to comply or conform to the new settlement. If you're not a realtor, you don't have to follow the rules. This compensation rule that requires that you pay your commission to the buyer's agent, whoever's representing you, or the buyer's agent has to get it directly from their buyer versus getting it from the seller. It's interesting. Anyhow, a sales associate who works for the selling broker sells the property for $160,000. The associate gets 60% share of all commission she brings to the company. How much is due to the associate? We can do the math right here in front of us. And if you can recall the formula, it's an ABC formula, calculation of sales commission. You take your total sale or sales, you multiply it by the rate of commission, and that's going to equal your actual commission. So what's the sale? Exactly. Sale of a property for $160,000. I'm pretty sure you're with me on that. And what percentage of commission is agreed to on the sale? 7%. The result of that is going to be 11,200. Is that right? Okay. But we're not done because it's going to be split between 2 cooperating brokers. But what side are we calculating for, the listing side or the selling side? They tell us. It says 55% to selling, and the associate works for the selling, so it's going to be the selling side. That's 55%. They give us that indication in the question, and I think that's 6,160. Is that right? Okay. But we're not done yet because the associate gets 60% share of all commission she brings. So you multiply that by 60%, and I think you get 3,696. Okay. Is that one of our choices? D is in Delta. Any questions? Piece of cake. I mean, sales commission. You guys should not have a problem with sales commission. When it comes to sales commission, you got it. That's a layup. All right. All right, let's move on. 9. A woman owned 3/8 of a property. She was paid $45,000 for her share of the proceeds when she sold that property. You have to work backwards to get the total selling price. And as I mentioned to you, this is basic algebra, working backwards to get the answer. What's ABC? A is always going to represent the what of something. Look, I'm writing it total times B, which represents the rate of something, equals C, which represents result or part of something. Do we know the total selling price? Isn't that what they're asking us for? Exactly. So we're going to work backwards to get that information, but that's going to be our missing variable. But we know, if you look up here, I'm going to lay it out for you. We don't know what the total selling price is, but we know that 3/8 of the selling price gave her what part? What was her part from the sale? $45,000 for 3/8. You understand how we laid this out? And the only thing we're missing is the total selling price. So you isolate, you get rid of everything else on this side of the equation. In this case, the 3/8%, right? Or no, just 3/8. How do you get rid of it? You simply slide and divide. So you take this and divide it by, in decimal form, 3/8 is the same thing as 0.375. So now, the total equals 45,000 divided by 0.375, and you get what? 120,000. Is that one of our choices? Yeah. It lines up. Correct answer is D as in Delta. Any questions? There's different ways to solve these problems. I get that. And I don't need you guys to share with me the various ways that you chose to solve this problem. As long as you consistently get the correct answer using your methodology, go for it. But once again, I'm giving you something to rely on that will consistently provide you with the correct answer. So that's why I provide these steps and go through it step by step. No shortcuts per se. Number 11, a buyer is purchasing a property with the closing scheduled for April 22nd, non-leap year. You see? Lawson? Look what it says for you. Non-leap year. The annual property tax, why did they need to say annual? We know property taxes are paid annually. 2,652. The sale contract states that the day of the closing belongs to what? Yeah, day of the closing belongs to buyer. So they identify this for us. They need to share that with us. What is the property tax proration using, Lawson? The 365-day method. They share that with us. We could take out our handouts for calculation, unpaid property taxes, prorating unpaid property taxes. We take the total property taxes for the year, 2,652, and always our first step when doing a proration calculation is to get the daily what? Rate. In this case, the daily rate of rent or property taxes owed. So take 2,652 and divide it by 365. I'll show you how that looks. 2,652 is like $7 and something. Yeah, exactly. Leave it in your calculator because we're going to need it for step number 2. And you want to be as accurate as possible for exam purposes. So yes, it's $7.2657 continues on. We can stop right there for now, but you have it in your calculator already, and we're going to need it for step number 2. Before we calculate step number 2, we need to identify this information. When is the closing date? April 22nd, and the day of the closing belongs to the buyer. So everything is known. There's nothing that's a mystery. They have to give us this information. Now let's utilize it. What's our goal from this? Figure out how much of that property tax bill the seller is responsible for based on how long they own the property within the year, starting from January 1st all the way to the closing date. Because after the closing date, the buyer is going to take over responsibility for taxation on that property. So what do? You take the daily rate and multiply it by the days the seller owned the property from January 1st to the closing date. And this is where knowing how many days are in each month is important. How many days in January? Yeah, January is 31 plus February, non-leap year, 28 plus March, 31. And April is not the full month. Exactly, because on the 22nd, Yeah, on the 22nd, which is the closing date they're citing here, it belongs to the buyer. So the seller actually stops being responsible for property taxation on the 21st. And now you can simply add those figures together and you get 111 days. Is that right? Okay. So you take 111, you plug it in, and you multiply across. Guess what? It's already in your calculator, $7 and change here, multiplied by 111. And you get the amount that you can round to the nearest cent, which is what? 806, and round to the nearest cent, 50 cents. But you'll notice you have answers, more than one, that's 806.50. Is it A or is it C? Yes, because of the credits and the debits. Debit the seller 806.50 and simultaneously credit the buyer. Remember, the closing disclosure breaks down closing expenses between the buyer and seller on the day of the closing. So you can easily figure out who's responsible for what amount if you just take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Number 12, a woman bought 3 200-foot lots on a lake for $500 per front foot each. She then subdivided the lots into 6 lakefront lots, which she then sold for $62,500 each. What is her percentage of profit on the sale? So we know it's a profit or loss formula. Here's how you figure it out. We need the rate of return to start with. So we need to fill in these components here, these variables: total cost, what she paid for it, and what she sold it for. They don't directly give us this information, but they do provide enough for us to figure it out. Here's how you figure it out. 3 200-foot lots on a lake for $500 per front foot each. But then she subdivided into how many? 6. If you complete this equation here, you'll get how much she paid per lot, what her cost is per lot. Do that math. And I'll do it with you. 3 times 200 times 500 divided by 6. That means her cost per lot is what? 50,000. You understand how we got that amount? 3 200-foot lots on a lake for $500 per front foot each. So that's, if you multiply, that will tell you what she paid for all 3 lots. But she didn't leave them as 3. She subdivided into 6. So you simply take that and divide by 6. And we know what she sold each lot for. $62,500. They tell us in the question. So now we have everything we need in order to get the result. Yes. You can multiply by 6 and you could use larger numbers. Yes. But I just think this saves you a little bit of time. Just a little bit of time. Maybe it's an illusion for me that I'm saving time, but you're using larger numbers if you multiply by 6. This is smaller numbers. Debatable. Regardless, it's still going to give you the same result. I'm pretty sure, I'm confident you got the correct answer if you told me that. So you slide and divide, and you take 62,500 divided by 50,000. And what's the result of that? Yeah, 62,500 divided by 50,000. And you get 1.25. That should be in your calculator. But remember, this is a percentage. So how do we convert it? You can either multiply by 100 or move the decimal 2 spaces to the right, and you get 125%. But this is just, what do we just identify or calculate? The rate of what? Return. We need the rate of return to get the profit. And obviously we can see it's a profit, right? If she bought it for 50 and sold it for 62.5, she made a profit. Her rate of return is 125%. She broke even. She got at least 100% of her money back, obviously. So you subtract that, and what's left over is her actual profit, which is what? 25%. Does that match up? Yeah. Correct answer is B. Okay. Let's move on. 13. A warehouse measures 720 by 500 and rents for $118,000 per month. What is the rent per square foot per month? Anybody have an answer? Okay, let's go through this together. First of all, what you need to know is how to calculate an area in square feet of whatever space is presented to you. This is how you figure it out. You take the width by depth, which is 720 by what? 500. And when you do that math, you get how much? 720 by 500. 360? Is that right? 360,000 square feet. But it rents for $118,000 per month. So how do you get the rent per square foot per month? This is how you figure it out if you can pay attention here. All you have to do is take the rent, 118,000, and simply divide it by the square feet. And then you get the rent per square foot. You see the order? The rent per square foot. Take the rent and divide it by the square feet. And you do the math and you get, well, this is a 33 cents, right? 33 cents per square foot per month. Is that what you got? When you take 118,000 divided by 360,000? You get 0.327 continues on. Okay, that's 33 cents, round to the nearest cent. If you made the mistake, this is where people make a mistake. Who got $3.05? Okay, the reason why is because you reversed the division. You took 360,000 divided by 118, and they prepare for you making that mistake. You have to take 118 divided by 360. Any questions here? All right. Number 15. See if I can close this out now. Yep. We can close that out as well. A couple is purchasing an apartment building. Each of the 5 apartments rents for $815 per month. The closing is scheduled for September 16th, and the rents were collected on September 1st. What is the rent proration for this transaction, and to whom will the amount be credited? The day of the closing belongs to the buyer. We can use this handout. Well, not this one. We worked on that one already. It's the next one after that. Prorating prepaid monthly rent. Here we go. The first step always when doing a proration calculation is to get the daily what? Daily rate. In this case, the daily rate of rent. They don't just tell us what the total rent is, but they give us enough information to figure it out. What's the rent per unit? 815? But how many units are there? 5 units. So you simply multiply and you'll get the total amount of rent that's collected, 4,075. Is that right? Okay. And to get the daily, you have to divide by the number of days in the month. Well, what's the closing date? We can identify it. September 16th. And the day of the closing belongs to who? The buyer, right? So if we're in September, how many days in September? 30 days. And this is what we're going to divide by to get the daily rate. So take 4,075 divided by 30, you get 135.83. Is that right? Okay. 135.83. We can leave that in our calculator. We're going to need it for step number 2. And step number 2 is to take that daily rate that we just calculated and multiply it by the days the buyer owned the property from the closing date all the way to the end of the month. Because what is our objective here? Figure out how much of that rent that was already collected by the investor, the seller, should you get as a new buyer based on when you become the new owner in that month. You should get a portion of that rent because you're the owner for part of the month. And we can tally. It's okay. Don't be afraid to tally, guys, because you can make a mistake if you just look at it. So, the closing date is September 16th, and the day belongs to the buyer, and we're counting for the buyer. So you start on the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. So that's a total of how many days? That is 15 days. You know how to tally. You might remember this from school. And multiply. Go ahead and multiply. I think it's 135.83333333 continues on. And you multiply by 15. And yes, what do you get? Now you can round to the nearest cent. $2,037.50 would be the correct answer. Does that match up? There's only one choice, right? C is in Charlie. Here's the thing. It's going to be debit to the seller, credit to the buyer. Once again, don't round until you get the end to the end. But 15 days is half of the month, right? September is 30 days. 15 is half of that, correct? So shouldn't you get half the rent? You remember that example? What's half of 4,075? Well, guess what? It's your result. Anyhow, let's move on. 17. You have to know how certain items are going to appear on your closing disclosure. How is the buyer's earnest money deposit going to show up on the closing disclosure? If we know that the closing disclosure shows you money exchanged between the seller and the buyer on the day of the closing, how is the deposit going to show up? Because was anybody debited the deposit on the day of the closing? No. When was the deposit debited from the buyer? When their offer was accepted, correct? And it was just being held in escrow until the day of the closing when that money gets dispersed. So it's not going to show up as a debit because it wasn't debited on the day of the closing. The closing disclosure shows you credits and debits for that day, money exchange on that day. But it will show up as a what? It's going to show up as a credit. Who gets credit for their deposit? The buyer. The buyer gets credit for their deposit towards the purchase price. And you'll see that as, correct answer is letter B. B is in Bravo. How is a purchase price going to be entered on the closing disclosure? Who's responsible for paying the purchase price, buyer or seller? The buyer pays the purchase price. So are you crediting or debiting the buyer if you're taking something away from them? You're debiting. So you're debiting the buyer, and simultaneously, who gets that money? The seller. So you're crediting the seller. What answer reflects that? C. Do you understand why? You see, the closing disclosure is quite simple. How are unpaid property taxes going to show up? We just went through this. Unpaid property taxes, debit seller, they're responsible, and simultaneously credit the what? Credit the buyer. Wait, for number 18, what'd you guys get? Yes, it's C. Okay, and unpaid property taxes? It's D. D is in Delta. And we worked on 20 already. All right, let's move on. How'd you guys feel? Feel a little bit better after we went through the review? Does it make a little bit more sense? That's the whole purpose of this. We have to review, we have to repeat, we have to get exposure to this again and again. Practice makes permanent. All right. Let's move on to the review questions for Unit 18, which was all about taxes, and more flipping taxes. Number 2. What'd you guys get? When we get to a math problem or it needs additional explanation, I'll do so. But when do property taxes become delinquent? It's B as in Bravo. 3. First step, complain to the county property appraiser. That is correct. 4. It is C. You're not going to see that on your state exam. 5. So you have to know what's on this list. Do you remember all the wonderful exemptions you might qualify for based on your circumstance and the homestead assessed value? A 25% disabled veteran who's 75 years old, there used to be an exemption for that age, not anymore, has been granted a homestead exemption on their primary residence, $270,000 is their assessed value. What's the total exemption for a county? So we can look at the column that says county, and then on the left is qualifier. Let's start with this first section, which has to do with the assessed value of your property. Is the assessed value over $75,000? Yes. So automatically for county, we're on county, they get an initial exemption of how much? $50,000. So we know it's at least 50, but they're also at least how much percent disabled? Are they at least 10% disabled in service-connected disability? Yes. So you get an additional $5,000 for that. So what is it? 50 plus 5 is 55. Is 55 one of our options? C as in Charlie. Okay, 6. What'd you guys get? It is D. That's false. 7. Let me go through this with you guys. This is calculating a special assessment. If the lot frontage is 100 feet, the street paving is $40 per foot, and the city is going to cover 25% of the expense. What's your special assessment? Here's how you figure it out. It's really quite simple. 100 feet is how much of your lot touches the road where the paving is getting done at $40 per linear foot, and that's $4,000. Easy math. But the city said they're going to cover 25%, which means you have to pay, or you're responsible for 75%, which gives you 3,000. Is that right? $3,000. But we're not done, because you only pay half. If it's for a street paving, there's 2 sides to every street. You only pay half, which means you simply divide by 2, and you get your result, which is $1,500. And that would mean the correct answer is B. You see how simple? Now here's the thing. Look, you encounter 3,000 and 4,000 as one of your options to throw you off. We saw those dollar amounts right here. Anyhow, I'm glad you knew the difference. Number 9, what's the maximum interest you can make off of a tax lien? Yes. B as in Bravo. 10. Yes. C as in Charlie. Anything over that tax exemption, not tax exemption, but deduction for profit when you sell your primary residence, you're going to have to pay capital gains tax. Let's continue that. The maximum amount of profit that may be excluded from taxation on the sale of a primary residence for a qualifying couple filing separately is what? Yes. Because they're filing what? If they file jointly, then double it. Yes. I'm glad you paid attention to that. Tricky. Not a trick question, but tricky. 12. It is D. Cannot use homeowners insurance as a deduction. I wish. 13. What'd you guys get? It is A as in Alpha. 14 is B as in Bravo. And 15 is D as in Delta. Let's take a break. Yeah. Let's take a break. Be back at 6. Got 15 minutes. Stretch out. Do what you got to do.
And Michael, can I ask you a quick question for tomorrow?
Yes, sir.
We're doing the review, right?
No,
As a
tomorrow.
as a group.
Oops. Sorry. Yeah. I thought you said you wanted to listen to Katy Perry music, so I apologize. No, I'm just kidding. No. Tomorrow is reserved for preparation, independent preparation for the class exam.
So it
But
won't be as a group.
No,
Okay.
no. Really? Usually we, in the past, we would make our students take an exam on the last day of class. We don't do that. We stretch out the rule to help you guys out. And I'm going to inform you of that once again. Just like I shared with you the rules on the first day of class, I'm going to reiterate those rules so you know what happens after today and what your obligations are to successfully complete this course. You okay with that? All right. Happy holidays. See you guys in at 5. Okay, let's get started. Actually, I need to print this out for you. Okay, so for the rest of us. Yeah. Just print that. I think that as well. All right, we're going to start with Unit 16. Unit 16 is all about appraisal, as we can see, obviously, from the title. But we actually talked about this in the first day of class. Do you remember when we talked about appraising? How you, as a real estate professional, you can appraise property? You just can't represent yourself as a state certified or licensed appraiser. You cannot prepare an official appraisal report. Only state certified licensed appraisers can provide this official appraisal report. And we also talked about charging a fee. You can charge a fee for your estimate of value, but it can only be a flat what? A flat fee, not a rate, based on the time and difficulty of the assignment. You cannot charge a commission. You cannot charge a rate because it's a conflict of what? Of interest. If I said I'm going to give you a percentage based on what you think the property is worth, how much is the property worth? $1 billion. That's why you can't do it. Can't be percentage based.
Michael,
Yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Do you still want me talking now at 6?
Oh, hey, I didn't even notice you came in. Welcome, welcome.
I love
Sorry about that. Yes, yes, you
love the
can
awesome power.
definitely take over. Before we get started, and actually it gives me some time to print out some handouts for you guys, I welcomed a special guest for you guys because I like to bring out good guests for you to learn a little bit more about the business. This guest in particular, extremely knowledgeable, deeply rooted in financing. Remember, we talked about the mortgage loan originator's license and how you should definitely get the MLO license. But you need to understand in general what it means to obtain financing, the process of getting a loan, because 90% of the buyers you work with are going to obtain financing, right? So you have to understand that process to properly guide them, debt to income ratios, and how to fix their qualification process. Also, before you get that license, you need to establish a good relationship with a lender or a mortgage brokerage company that has relationships with a multitude of lenders and can have different products that they can offer your buyers that you're working with. It's not the end of the road if they don't qualify for traditional financing. That's how the world of lending works today. So I welcome Noel. Is it Noel? Are you here?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
You don't know my voice. by-
Noel is from Home First Lending, and they're based out of Lake Mary. And give her a round of applause. Nice, warm welcome here. And she's going to share a little bit more about what she does and what it means to team up. It's a really good idea. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, guys. My name is Noelle, and I'm a loan originator with Home First Lending. Like Michael said, we are out in Lake Mary. We're a local brokerage. So what that means is essentially we're a one-stop shop for your clients. You guys are going to come across a lot of buyers that need financing in some way. So as a brokerage, we take one application, we do one credit pull, and we're able to match them with one of our over 60 different lenders. We do a lot of different forms of financing. Thank you. It was throwing me off seeing the Zoom screen in the back. We do a lot of different forms of financing. So like Michael mentioned, we do a lot of creative financing. We do fix and flips, hard money. We do condos. We do bank statement loans. We do pretty much everything under the sun because we know that every buyer's scenario is unique and different in its own way. And because of that, we're able to get the majority of the people that we talk to the closing table. We also pride ourselves on the fact of not turning somebody away. It's just a not right now. So we do initial consultations with buyers where we're able to kind of give them a game plan and talk through it with them and say, hey, you know, based on what you told me, maybe you do have the income lined up and you have great credit, but you know, we need some form of assets. So either they need to go through some type of down payment assistance programs and be willing to go through the terms of that program, or we need to put this on hold and save a little bit more money. Maybe they have the income and they have the money saved, but their credit isn't so great, and we can connect them to credit repair specialists, or maybe their income's just a little bit out of the box and there's different ways to make it work. We just have to figure it out. So we pretty much have everything. So whenever you guys come across buyers, you might hear something that sounds a little funny. You're probably like, there's absolutely no way this person's going to be able to get financing. Run it by us and let us make the determining factor and decision, and we'll be able to walk you guys through it. But other than that, we pretty much do everything outside of financing as well. We have an in-house studio. We help with marketing. We help you guys film content. So we know that obviously as agents, you guys want to grow your brand as well. And we love helping you guys in that way. So if there's anything we can do to help you guys, we're here. I'm not sure if, hold on. No, Michael's still there. Michael, I'm done.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thanks.
I'm gonna drop my contact information in the chat. So if you guys do have any questions, whether it's about getting your MLO license or just financing in general, I'm here. You guys
Noel.
can. Yeah,
Hey, I'm passing around the microphone because a few people in class have questions.
okay.
If you are thinking about investing as well, they have investment loans. She mentioned a few of them already. Be a good time to ask questions about that so you can learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah, do you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay. Now I was gonna ask that you give us your information because some of us are investors, and I was just told that you work with investors as well.
yeah. So we have a bunch of different investment products. Our biggest one right now is fix and flip, because you guys can actually do a fix and flip with as little as 10% down, as long as the project makes sense, obviously. If the numbers are a little bit tighter, then they might make you guys put a little bit more down. But our another really popular loan is something called a DSCR loan, where basically it's no proof of income. We don't care about your debt to income ratio, that I know that Michael teaches you guys that. We literally just care about whether the property is going to be able to sustain itself. So what will happen is during the process, an appraiser is going to go out there and they're going to put together something called a rent schedule. And as long as the projected rent that they put together matches whatever your projected mortgage is, you can actually close. We don't care about your income. We don't care about what you have going on. As long as we know that the property is going to be able to rent itself out, we're good with it. You could do that as a purchase, and you can even do it as a refinance. So another thing that you see a lot of people doing is buying a fix and flip, and maybe they change their mind and they decide they actually want to keep the house instead. You could do a DSCR refinance. So you don't need to show us anything pertaining to your income. As long as the property is going to rent, we're good with it.
And is there a number on that, a number of loans that you could possibly have, or is it so long as the property is viable, you're good? Is there a limit to how
No.
much?
So like with traditional investment purchases, if you just do like a regular conventional loan, you can only finance up to 10 properties. But with DSCR, you can have as many as you want. So if you have 100 properties floating around out there, you're good.
Okay, all right.
And with those, they are business purpose loans, so you close them in an LLC. So it's another good thing too. Let's say I have somebody who purchased a property with a DSCR loan, and now they want to go ahead and purchase maybe another primary for themselves because of the fact that the property is owned in an LLC. When you go to get your new loan for the house that you're actually going to live in and qualify the traditional way, I don't even need to disclose that you own that house to them. And whatever you're doing with that house doesn't even matter.
Excellent, thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, make sure that I get your information. I'd like to get your contact.
Awesome.
Awesome. Anybody else have a question? No? Okay. Yeah, DSCR loan, DSCR, this unlocks your investment opportunity tremendously. Just going out and getting the deal is half the battle, and then the other half of the battle is getting financing, getting your funds, getting capital together. So rather than going out and raising capital, you can do it yourself, and they make it easy for you. Of course, there's points and there's lenders charges and fees associated with it, but it's a pill that you can easily swallow if you find a really good deal and you know that it can support itself, as she was mentioning, income producing property. So it's really cool. I've already taken advantage of 3 so far. I've done 3 fix and flip loans that I'm converting into DSCR, and next year I'm probably going to double that. So it's a good opportunity for you guys to connect and get with a lender that actually offers these programs. But anyhow, Noelle, she'll share her contact information with you. You're going to put it in the chat, or you've already
Yeah,
done
I
it?
just dropped it in there.
Okay. Thank you so much for stopping by. We appreciate it. Okay. Give her a round of applause.
Thank you guys.
you
I
can-
hope you all have a great night.
Yeah, you could take out your cell phone and zoom into the chat. Anyhow,
Okay.
take care. Enjoy your
Bye, guys.
Christmas. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.
Okay, back in our unit. We're in unit 16. Actually, what I wanted to mention to you, and I probably should have said this towards the beginning of class, but it's never too late. You guys should network with each other. You guys should exchange contact information with each other if you haven't already. Form study groups. Who's going to be that first person to take on that initiative of creating a WhatsApp group? Because it's going to keep you motivated. And if you stay in touch with each other and then you share your performance, you take your state exam and you post a picture with you with the pass notification that you get at the testing facility, it's going to push somebody to actually move forward and get it done themselves, because we know that we get excited about things, and then when it becomes real, or it maybe lingers on a little bit longer than we anticipated, especially the holidays coming up, we start forgetting about things, life gets in the way. I don't want that to happen to you guys. I want you to take your exams as soon as possible. So staying together, networking with each other, exchanging contact information is super important. And somebody, I'm sure, agrees. I would love to exchange contact information. Great. All right. Thank you, Hubert. You want to set up the WhatsApp group? Do you know how to do that, Hubert? Okay. Yes. Awesome. Okay. Well, when you get it set up. Anyhow, I'll remind you guys at the end so that way you can exchange contact information. And this is what you pay to be a part of. Network with like-minded individuals. And this is the highest concentration of like-minded individuals. You all set aside your busy schedules to accomplish the same goal. Just think about that. And it's a 2-week commitment. It's not a small thing with your busy lives and kids and work and all this stuff. So please exchange contact information. So important. And thank you for getting it started, Hubert. We appreciate it. And I'll make sure that I show everybody this chat box with all your contacts. Great. All right, on the first page of this unit, page 362, page 362, we see under the appraisal foundation, we need to know about the appraisal qualification board, just in case you're tested on this, establishes minimum criteria for state certified licensed appraisers, endorses uniform examination certifications. And then we look at the standards boards. Standards board sets minimum standards for appraisals performed for federally related transactions. We'll come back to federally related transactions later on. And you'll notice here it says develops, interprets, and amends the rules that appraisers must follow. Uniform standards of professional appraisal practices. Now, with that aside, this is just general information. This is on page 362, but we're actually going to move on to page 363. This is all preliminary information to what I really want to show you in this unit. In this unit, we're going to learn about the 3 methods of appraisal. The 3 methods of appraisal. So you might have been curious, okay, I know what appraisal is, but how do I actually figure out the value of whatever property is presented to you when you're working with a buyer or a seller? Hey, I'm interested in buying this property, but I need to know what I should offer for this property. And I want to make sure it's a fair offer, competitive offer, but I don't want to offer more than what this property is worth. And I think they're listing it for too high, right? So you can essentially answer that, satisfy that curiosity that they have, and be able to tailor a offer that's attractive, yet it's not too much for that property. Or if you're working with the seller, it's the same reason. You need to know what to list that property for. And typically, you don't charge for this service. You provide this as a courtesy for utilizing you as a real estate professional to either list or help them purchase. You're not going to nickel and dime them. Oh yeah, you're going to list your property with me. I'm going to charge you 3, 4, whatever the percent is. And then on top of that, I'm going to charge you $500 to figure out what we should sell your property for. Why do that? But you need to know how to do it. So I'm showing you in this unit the methods of figuring it out. Certified appraisers. On line 5, there are 2 types: certified residential, which appraise what type of property? Residential. And then we have certified general appraisers, which appraise what type of property? Any type. You'll see that on line 8. Let's move on. What is a federally related transaction? We've seen this more than once on the first day of class, throughout the course, and then we see it again. You'll see right here. It's any real estate related financial transaction. Essentially, when somebody is obtaining financing to purchase the property, there are federal laws that govern this transaction because financing is involved. ACOA, TILA, RESPA. Do you remember those? And for that reason, only state certified or licensed appraisers can provide an official appraisal report for this type of transaction. They will not utilize your services as a sales associate, even though you can provide an estimated value, but not for these types of transactions. The rules that appraisers must follow, we already saw these. USPAP. We talked about CMAs and BPOs on the first day of class. Do you remember this? And if you're providing a CMA or a BPO, they do not have to comply with the rules that appraisers must follow, those standards. But we saw this unit 1, first day of class. Let's continue on. And now let's get into some new information on page 364. We see some appraisal terminology that we should know about. And a lot of people use these terms interchangeably. They think it means the same thing, but they do have their own meanings, and we should know the difference. What's the cost of that? What's the price? What's the value? How much did you pay? Let's go through each one of these meanings together, and then I'll test you to make sure you're paying attention. Cost is the expense to create a good or service. And you'll see that right next to it. Do you see create? So once again, it's the expense to create a good or service. Price is what it's paid for or what it's sold for. And value is what it's worth. But I like to say it's the power of what you can exchange it for. Value is the power of what you can exchange it for. You might be presented a question like this on your exam, just to make sure you're paying attention. A house was constructed for 600,000. What is that? Cost, price, or value? It was constructed for 600. It's cost, the expense to create. It appraised for 800. Value, who determines value? An appraiser. So that's a clear indication as to what the value is. Value is determined by an appraiser, right? And it was sold for 700. Price, what it's sold for, exactly. So that's how you can identify. Let's talk about the various types of value that we have to know about The first one we've already seen several times. It's called what? Yes, it's determined every year by a county property appraiser for tax purposes. Insurance value is the value of things that are covered within a policy, usually as a result of some type of catastrophe, like hurricane and so forth. And it's for replacement cost, right? Investment value is a little bit vague because it's the value according to an investor, and everybody has their own financial goals. Somebody might have to complete a 1031 exchange, which means they have to spend all of their profits from the sale of one property to roll it into another. They can't touch a penny. So maybe they found the perfect investment, but what they have is actually more than what they're asking for the property, but they have to use all of the funds. So maybe this investor is willing to overpay for the next investment property because they have to absorb all of that cash. They can't touch a cent in order to complete officially the 1031 exchange. When most investors, if they're looking at this property and they're thinking, why would I overpay for a property? If they're asking 100,000, 200,000, I'm going to pay that, or I'm going to try to negotiate and get a better deal. So it's all the individual investors' objective, their agenda, and what they're trying to accomplish with their money. Liquidation value is what you can sell it for rapidly. You'll see right here, as a forced or a rapid sale. If you have to sell it immediately, moment's notice, what's the most you can get for it? Going concern value, we're going to discuss this in Unit 17, which is today. I'll come back to it. Salvage value means if your property were to be completely destroyed, what's the value of scrap materials that could be salvaged? These items do have a value, and that's the value that we're referring to. But the most important value, and the value that we're going to focus on for the remainder of this unit, has its own section, starts with the letter M. It's what? Market value. Let's go through this paragraph to better understand what market value is, because we're going to be asked to determine what market value for a particular property is. And that's the methods we're going to learn in this unit. It's the most probable price a property should bring in not a closed market, but an open and competitive market, under all conditions that are requisite to a fair sale, meaning nobody's desperate, the seller or the buyer, because that could jeopardize what the property is sold for if somebody's desperate, right? If the seller's desperate, they might be willing to compromise what it's actually worth and sell it for less. So it has to be a fair sale. And it says the buyer and seller are acting prudently and knowledgeably, meaning that the buyer and the seller are equally knowledgeable in the transaction. And you understand why that's important. If the seller is more knowledgeable than the buyer, then one party can get taken advantage of and overpay or underpay, right? So it would jeopardize what the actual value of that property is, what it's sold for. Equally knowledgeable is a condition that has to be met, and assuming the price is not affected by any undue stimulus, any drastic change in our market, like what happened in 2008. Unpredictable, we couldn't foresee that. Well, most people, at least. And the select few that knew it was coming made a lot of money off of it. I don't know if you are aware of that. Michael Burry and a few other people. Anyhow, I'm not going to get into that. The point remaining is this. As long as these conditions are met, we should be able to determine what market value of any property is. And we're going to learn the methods of figuring that out in this unit. So it's pretty exciting. It's a big part of our business, and people rely on us to have that area of expertise. It's really quite simple once you get the hang of it, but let's move on. Characteristics of value. In order for anything to have value, it has to have at least one of these four characteristics. Forms the acronym what? DUS. So let's go through each one. D stands for what? Yeah. Does a good or service have a demand or a desire to it? Desire or need. That's going to dictate value, of course. We're on page 366. Utility. Is the good or service useful? Is it able to fill somebody's need? That's going to dictate value. The scarcity is the availability of the good or service. Is there a lot of it available or is it scarce? Supply and demand, right? And transferability is exactly as stated. How easily the good or service can be transferred from one company or individual to another. This is going to dictate value, like a property that has a clear title versus a property that has title defects. God bless you. So the property that has title defects, title issues, since it's not easily transferable, it has these problems that may have to get resolved prior to closing and so forth. It could jeopardize what that property is actually worth. We get it. Let's move on to the bottom of this page, and we see something called the principle of what? Starts with an S. Substitution. The principle of substitution, highlight this paragraph, is going to be the basis for all three approaches of estimating real property value. So what does that mean, the basis for all three approaches? It means the three methods of estimating real property value that we're going to learn in this unit utilize this philosophy to determine value of a particular property. What is the philosophy? The philosophy is this. If that property across the street that looks pretty similar to mine sold for X amount of dollars, I should be able to get X amount of dollars for my property. That's the principle. You're substituting value. So based on what property sold for in the surrounding area that are similar to yours dictates what your property can sell for. Yep. On page 367, I'm going to simplify this page for you. It's summarized for us in the shaded box, first paragraph. They give you an example, but let me give you an example. I'll simplify it. Highest and best use is most likely when you're working with an investor. As we know from the first day of class, we discussed one of the services you could provide once you become licensed is consulting. You remember? You're allowed to charge for consulting, giving your professional opinion on real estate. Of course, you want to accomplish that when you're a little bit more knowledgeable and spent more time in this business and can provide that value. But regardless, you can provide it and charge for it. Highest and best use is one of the services you might provide in consulting. And it's a big business. You ever wonder why Chick-fil-A, because you guys love eating at Chick-fil-A, I'm using it for a specific example. They open up in specific locations, maybe even with a specific demographic too. You think this is just by coincidence? Oh, that space opened up, we're just going to move in there. No, they do intense research and study demographics, average income of areas to find the perfect location for their Chick-fil-A. And they want to make sure it's within a certain distance of the next Chick-fil-A over. Same thing for Starbucks. They spend tens of millions of dollars on this. And they pay real estate professionals to provide their consulting professional opinion. What's the highest and best use for this property? What is the most profitable thing that I can put on this property? So you have to do that research. You have to look in the area, figure out what would be in demand. If I construct whatever type of business here, how would the community react to this? Would it be a successful business? Could the income support this type of service we're providing? And you provide the details of that research and you charge for this advice. You're allowed to, at least. Anyhow. Okay. I could tell you about 3 where I live that are not directly next to a grocery store, but I understand where that comes from. Here's the thing. Investors. One of investors' strategies is when they look for investment property, they look for Chick-fil-A's and they look for Starbucks within close proximity. Because they're trying to take a shortcut. They're thinking, I don't have to spend tens of millions of dollars on this research. These companies already did the research as to determine what is the best area to construct this business and have longevity in that area. So for that reason, of course, I buy in this area. This area is going to do pretty well. And usually they're right. Okay. Investor friendly or landlord-friendly markets. Go to page 368. If you're not already there, let's learn some appraisal terminology. Specifically on line 7, starts with the O. It's called what? Let me read this out to you. It occurs when an owner invests more money into the structure than they can expect to recapture when they sell it. What does that mean? Well, let me give you an example, and let's see if you know. Okay, you can provide a response to me. What do you think is the most common example of an over improvement for a home in Florida? Where you're going to spend more money to add it than what you can recapture when you sell it. A pool is always an example. And I can tell you, just based on experience, pool homes are a little bit more desirable now because Florida is the most moved to state in the nation. And when you're coming from these very cold places and you're moving to Florida, what's the dream? I better have a pool in the backyard, right? We're swimming all year round. I don't care if it's cold outside, right?
My realtor at the time told me that if you want a house with a pool, just buy a house with a pool. He's like, don't buy a house.
Don't buy it
with a
after.
pool.
Yeah, exactly. Don't construct afterwards.
Cost you $100,000 and $50,000 to get a house there.
Well, I live by a rule of thumb now because they're a little bit more desirable. I would say about 60% of what you paid to construct it is what you'll get back in added value. And the average cost for a pool right now is about $50,000-$60,000. Average size pool. We're not talking about the pavers. We're not talking about the attached spa, the micro pebble, the heated, the saltwater system, the lighting, the sound system. Not talking about none of that. Huh? Yeah. That's all extra. The last time, man, I designed a badass pool once upon a time for a previous house. We had a lake house in Osceola County, and the cheapest quote I got was $25,000. $25,000. You will never find that again. I don't think so. At least it's crazy what people are telling me how much they're getting quoted for pools, but I'm in the wrong business. You mean pool construction business? But materials are more expensive, labor, all that stuff, whatever. Assemblage and plottage. Assemblage is something interesting in our business. It's when you combine multiple lots that are adjacent into one large lot and sell it as a whole. You can't just say you're going to do it. You got to do it with the county. And plottage is when it's worth more money by assembling. If it's worth more money when you assembled, that's called plottage. Quite interesting. Progression and regression. Progression is when you have an ugly house in the middle of a beautiful neighborhood. The surrounding properties will increase the value of yours. Regression is the opposite. You have a McMansion in the middle of a not so good looking neighborhood. Surrounding properties will decrease the value of yours. Like where I live in Winter Park, we're on the old side of Winter Park and it's more established. So you have a lot of these old Florida homes, but because they're surrounded by McMansions, they're asking ridiculous amounts for these tiny little Florida homes. And you know what a Florida house looks like, right? Concrete block. Yeah, almost looks like a flat roof, but barely breaking 1,000 square feet. And depending on the lot size, they're very desirable to custom home builders. So they're tearing them down and then, but when you're asking $1 million for the tiny little Florida home, it's just not feasible. And you kind of have to just take what they got. But next we see introduction to 3 approaches of value. And that's the 3 methods of estimating real property value that I mentioned we're going to see in this unit and discuss. Sales comparison approach is the first one we're going to see, or the comparable sales method. Cost appreciation approach, or the cost method, and the income capitalization approach, which is the income method. Let's start with the sales comparison approach. Let me explain it. Do you remember the CMA we talked about in the first day of class? Do you remember how a CMA works? You have a subject property that you're trying to figure out the value of. You look in the surrounding area, no more than how much of a radius?
You said 1 mile.
I said no more than 1 mile, but be as close as you can. Look for recent sales of similar properties as close as you can get to the current home, the subject property. And you're looking for at least how many recent sales? At least 3. of similar size and quality that have recently sold, but how recent? Yeah, no more than 6 months, but you want to get as close as you can get to the current date for recent sales because you want to increase the accuracy of your estimate of value. If you're looking at a sale that just happened a month ago and a sale that happened 6 months ago, well, the market is a little bit more volatile than what normally is. So I would say that property that sold a month ago is going to give you a more accurate understanding of value for your subject property. So it's all of that. All of that is still included in this method. But what do you need to know? Well, go to page 370. You'll be tested on something here. Part of this process is adjusting the comparable properties that you found. In this adjustment process, you never change the subject property. You'll see right here. All adjustments necessary to achieve the maximum degree of similarity must be made to each comparable property and not to the what? Subject property. So you have a subject property, you're trying to figure out the value of it. You found 3 recent sales of similar properties in the area, and you want to use this data to figure out the value of yours. But those properties that recently sold, yeah, they're kind of similar, but they're not exactly the same as your subject. Some features might be off. So you have to adjust those features to make it match the subject property. You'll see why this is important to create an accurate estimate of value. So what do you need to know about the adjustment process? Remember CBS and CIA. CBS, like the television network, it stands for if the comparable is better than the subject property, you must what? Correct. And if the comparable is inferior to the subject property, you must what? Add. Let's see how it works. This handout should be in front of you. Have this handout. This is an example of how you might be tested, the type of information that might be provided to you when you encounter a question about sales comparison approach on your state exam. Sales comparison approach, or the sales method. So you have a subject property. Sounds familiar, right? And we're trying to figure out the value of the subject property. We don't know that yet. Look at the bottom, estimated value. This is a mystery for now. But in the question, they'll tell you information about the subject property. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. I made this up, by the way. It's not always going to be a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It's a pool house, and it's 1,800 square feet. In the question, after they share these features about the subject property, they have to give you or assign a value for each feature. I made it up, of course, but they have to tell you in the question. What's the value of every bedroom? I made it up. I said $48,000. For every full bathroom, 26. Half bathroom, 13,000. Pool, 25,000. And per square foot, $175. You're probably wondering in real life, how do I figure out the value for each feature in the subject property? It requires additional research, but it's like this. If you found 2 properties that recently sold, and these 2 properties are cookie cutter, they're exactly the same, but there's only one feature that's different between these 2 properties. Property A has a pool, and it recently sold for $225,000. Property B, everything is the same except for it does not have a pool and sold recently for $200,000. You can conclude that because A had a pool, it sold for how much more? And that's how you put the value on the pool or that particular feature, whatever feature you're trying to determine. That's in real life. But once again, on your exam, they're going to share this information with you. In real life, realistically, because of software and technology, they have a tool that you get access to once you become a realtor. It's called Cloud CMA. You know what a CMA stands for. You can punch in the address for the property, the square footage, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, and then press enter, and it tells you what it's worth. It did all the research and found the recent sales and compared and did all of the analysis and spits out a value, high, medium price, and low price for that subject property. It's really cool. Tool that you can use when you're building out your social media campaigns. When you want to put an ad that says free home estimate, click this link. There's an API, connects. You can run it through this. You know what API is? Okay. It runs it through the software with the information that they input, spits out the data, shoots it to them. But in order to give them the results, you can collect their contact information. Anyhow, I'm just giving you some ideas. So now that we have this subject property and all these features, we don't know what the value is. How do we figure out the value? We have to turn to the what? Yes, your comparable properties. Comps are short for comparables. Remember the adjustment process. Comparable number one is what we're going to start with. We're going to adjust this comparable to make the features match the subject. So if we can follow along up here, comparable number one is a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. Is that the same? Do we have to change anything? No. Has a pool. Do we have to change anything? No. But what about the square footage? Is that the same? The square footage is not the same. It's different. So we have to adjust. Is the square footage better or inferior? It's inferior. So if the comparable is inferior, CIA, you must what? Add. How much square feet do we need to add to make it match the subject property? 200. Exactly. So that's exactly what we're going to do. You add 200 square feet. But when you add 200 square feet to any property, is it going to affect what that property is worth? What it should sell for? Yeah, of course. You add 200 square feet to any property, it should increase the value. And that's why this value is assigned. Do you see it? They have to give us this information. So we adjusted the square feet, but every square foot is how much in value? So do the math in your calculator. You're going to get the hang of it. You already got the hang of it, I'm sure of it. You take 200 square feet, which is a difference, multiply it by 175. And yes. So look up here. What does that mean? We're going to do our math down here. This is the blank lines is where we're going to do our math. Comparable number one, this recent sale sold for how much? 303,000. But it sold for 303,000 with 200 square feet less than our subject property. So if we add 200 square feet in value, it should have sold for how much more? $35,000 more for the difference in square feet. So that tells us our subject property should have sold for how much? 338,000. That's our adjusted sale price for comparable number one. You can continue on if you got the hang of it. But I'll go through each one of these step by step. Comparable number two, 3-bedroom. Is that the same? Yes. Do we have to change anything? No. But what about the bathrooms? Yes, an additional half bath, which we're missing. So now, is our comparable better or inferior? It's better by a half bathroom. So if the comparable is better, we must what? CBS, we must subtract. And we're subtracting 1 half bath. You understand why, right? To make it match. What about the pool? We're missing a pool. Does our subject have a pool? So it's inferior now. We must add a pool. So we're going to add a pool. We're going to do our math on these blank lines in just a moment. I'm just adjusting these, seeing the adjustments real quick. And 2,100 square feet, is that the same? Is it better or inferior? It's better than our subject, so we must what? Subtract how much square feet to make it match? 300 square feet. So let's do the math. Yes, this property recently sold for $395,000, but with those current features, If we were to adjust the features to make it match, let's do the math. It should have sold for something different. We subtract a half bathroom. Look at the indication here. 13,000 for the half bath. We're going to add, yes, 25,000 for the pool. And we're going to subtract 300 square feet in value. 300 times 175. Do that math. Yeah, that's a lot. $52,500 for the difference in square feet. Let's do the adjustment now. Let's do the math. Sold for $395, but now we adjusted those features to make them match the subject property. It should have sold for what if it matched the subject property completely? Subtract, add, subtract from 395, 395,000. Are you sure? You got 354, 500? Do we all concur with this? Okay,
Can you
that's
just
our adjusted sale price.
Can you confirm how you got the 52,500 square feet again?
Of course, 300 square feet times how much? 175 per square foot. Because we're subtracting 300 square feet, we have to know what dollar figure to subtract. So we multiply by the price per square foot. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
No problem. All right, now let's move on to comparable number 3. Maybe you already worked ahead, but 4 bedrooms, is that the same? No. So we need to change, right? Uh-oh. How do I redo? I erase this 354, 500. Okay. Yeah, we're going to subtract, subtract 1 bedroom. What about the bathrooms? It's better, so we need to subtract 1 bath, full bath. The pool, no change there, but the square footage, it's quite a bit more. How much more? Exactly, we're subtracting 850 square feet. So now let's do the math down here. Yes, it recently sold for this amount, but we're going to adjust and see what it should have sold for if it matched the subject property. But subtract the bedroom, which means you're subtracting how much? 48,000 for the difference in bedrooms. We subtract 1 bathroom, which is 26,000. That's the difference in bath. And we're subtracting 850 square feet in value. So take 850 and multiply it by 175. $175 per square foot, and there's 850. 148, 750. Do we all agree with this? You doing the math? Okay, good. Now we can do the subtraction here. We start with 539,000. We subtract. And what's our adjusted sale price if it matched the subject property? What should it have sold for? 250. You understand how we got this figure? Okay. Now what do we do with these 3 adjusted sale prices? You calculate the what of those 3? The average. Do you remember how to calculate the average of 3 numbers? Okay, yes. You might remember this from school. Here we go. So we add those three figures together. And I think you get like 1,008,750. Is that right? 1,008,750. But you take this amount, the sum of all three, and then you divide by what? 3, and you'll get the result. The estimated property value, our subject property, is worth 336,250. And that would be our answer for exam purposes. Do you understand how we got this amount? Any questions? Did I lose anybody in this explanation? So this is the answer that you're going to provide for your exam. Or if you're working with a client and they're asking you what their property is worth, this is how you might figure it out. I use something even simpler in real life. Even though you're going to be tested on this, there is a simpler method. It's called the comparable square foot approach. The comparable square foot approach utilizes the average value per square foot of a property within a specific area that may look similar to one another. And then you multiply it by the square footage of your property. And it's never failed me. I've always used this to figure out the value of investment properties that I'm going after. It's called the comparable square foot approach. I figure out the average value per square foot of a home within the area, and then I multiply it by the square footage of the subject property. That's it. Yeah, very easy. But the comparables, the recent sales that you found within the area should be as similar as you can get to the subject property. But that's how you eliminate a lot of the details, make it simpler. There's an add-on to this. After this, we're going to take a quick break. There's an add-on to the sales comparison approach that you should be aware of. And it's a very easy question when you're taking your exam. It's called reconciliation of value. If you know anything about accounting, you know what reconciliation means. It means to check for accuracies and errors and so forth, to provide the most accurate possible result. And that's what we see for the value. Let me read this out to you. It provides a more accurate estimate by identifying which comparables have the greatest weight on the value for the subject property. Weights, as they describe them here, are determined by the estimator, which is soon to be all of you, based on how similar the comparable is to the subject property. And there's a note that I included that you might be tested on. It says the sum of all three weights assigned must equal how much percent. We're going to make up our own weights, and then I'll explain what that actually means and why this might be useful in real life. But look at what we have here. We start with the comparable adjusted what? Didn't we just go through all those steps in the previous example to get the adjusted sale price for each comparable that we found? Yeah, let's use that as our example. For the first comparable, what was the adjusted sale price? 338,000. And then for comparable number 2, 354,500. And for comparable number 3 was 316,250. Now, here's where I need your opinion, because essentially that's what this is all about. It's an opinion. That's what an appraisal is. It's an opinion given by a skilled estimator, and you are soon to be the estimator. So out of these 3 comparables, which one was the most similar to the subject property? Which one out of those 3 did we have to change the least? Number 1. So with that understanding, if I can get your attention, since comparable number 1 was the most similar to the subject property, shouldn't we rely on comparable number 1 more so than the other 2 to figure out the value of the subject property? Yes, of course. So for that reason, we say it has the greatest weight on the value for the subject property. That's why they're called weights. And we're going to make it up just to see how it works. Remember, all 3 weights must equal how much percent? So let's assign it the highest percentage out of the three because it's the most similar to the subject property. Let's say 70. 70%. Out of these remaining two and three, comparables 2 and 3, which one was most similar, number 2 or number 3? Of course, yeah. So let's say 20%. And the only other percentage that we can assign to comparable number 3, because all 3 must equal 100, is what? 10%. You understand why? Yes. In real life, on your exam, they have to give you this information. There's no way you can solve it if they don't provide it to you. Here's one thing though, when you're taking your exam, they might give you 2 and then leave out the third because of your understanding that all 3 must equal what? Yeah. So you can conclude easily 10%. Anyhow, tell me 70% of this amount. What is it? 600? Okay. Go ahead and do the math. Multiply. All you're doing is multiplying. Take the dollar figure and multiply it by the percentage and tell me what you get. 20% of the next amount, which is what? 70,900? Even? Okay. And 10%. Oh, this is easy. 31,625. Yeah. What do you do with these 3 amounts? Simply add them together and get the sum, reconciled sum of value, which is what? Because remember, all 3 equal 100. So when you multiply, you add them together, it gives you 100% of the estimated value, which is what? 339, 125,000. What was our the previous value that we determined? 336, 250? That was the original, right? And we find out that our new estimate of value, our reconciled value, is only about what, $3,000 different? So you find out that the first estimate was pretty darn accurate. And in real life, it's going to be pretty consistent as well. So is this even relevant? Is this necessary in real life working as a real estate professional? Most likely not. Most likely not. But you're going to be tested on it. Luckily, this is one of the easiest math questions you're going to get. Let me explain why. On your exam, look up here. On your exam, they're going to give you the comparable adjusted sale price for each one. They're going to give you these 3 amounts. And they're going to give you the percentage for each one of the 3. So what do you have to do? Multiply and add. That's it. Multiply and add, and you got your result. So that's good for 1 point on your exam. Any questions here? Let's take a break. I want you guys to be back at 7:10. Quick break.
In an era where online education often falls short, there's an oasis transforming the digital learning landscape. Welcome to Cameron Academy. With our AI-powered platform, we're not just changing the game, we're rewriting the rules. At Cameron Academy, we're not just elevating education, we're lifting learners to new heights. Our comprehensive video lessons and AI tutors simplify complex real estate concepts. At Cameron Academy, we do more than prepare you for your exams. We equip you with the essential knowledge for a successful career in real estate. Break away from the traditional. Think computerized exams, a convenient study app at your fingertips, and AI support, but wait, that's not all. Live chat support when you need it, AI-driven text-to-speech content, your own personal AI tutor, and instant online certifications. This isn't just education. This is the future. We're reimagining what it means to ascend to success in the real estate industry. Choose Cameron Academy, the oasis of innovative learning. Your journey to success starts here.
If you open up your textbook, we're still in Unit 16. Specifically page 373. At the bottom, we see line 4, it says the cost approach, but officially it's called the cost depreciation approach. And what makes this different from the sales comparison approach? It's the fact that we are going to factor in depreciation to our calculation. What is depreciation? Yeah, loss in value caused by wear and tear, poor design, or the structure's surroundings. These all contribute towards depreciation, and it could affect what our property is actually worth. We'll see what that looks like with an example. We'll make one up. But if you go to page 374, step number 1 in this process is to establish the reproduction cost. You need to know what that means, reproduction cost, and how it differs from replacement. They're not asking for replacement, they're asking for reproduction. So what is it? It's the cost to reproduce a structure using the same exact materials, essentially. If you were to construct this property, the subject property, as if it were brand new, what would it take to reconstruct this property? That's what reproduction cost is. And you'll see that confirmed here. Reproduction cost must be established. You're going to subtract accrued depreciation. I'll show you what that means in just a moment. You'll get the depreciated value of the structure. The building is sitting on land. You add the land and you get the indicated property value. So I'll show you what you're tested on for class exam question here. Lock that in for now. Just highlight, mark it. But if you look at the bottom of page 374, we'll see step number 2, using this method to estimate real property value. It's subtract the accrued depreciation. We have to understand what accrued depreciation actually is. You'll see this at the end of line 25. Depreciation, first of all, depreciation is loss in what? Value. Caused by wear and tear, poor design, the structure surroundings, the proximity. I just mentioned that to you. But accrued depreciation, which is what we're subtracting, is the total depreciation that has accumulated over the years. How do you get that figure? I'm going to show you how to get that figure. It's the weirdest calculation you've ever seen, but it is something that you're going to learn about, and it's quite interesting. If you look on line 3, depreciation in a structure can be curable or what? Depending on how expensive. Naturally, curable means you can fix the problem and get your money back in added value, which means incurable. You're going to spend the money to fix it, replace it, but you're unable to get your money back in added value. Remember this for what we see next. Specifically, line 18. Depreciation in a structure can be attributed to 3 major causes. The first, officially, it's called physical what? Yes, I mentioned this to you already. Look at the end of line 19. It's wear and tear. That's physical deterioration. An example of this, the roof shingles are brittle because of exposure to the sun. The paint on the outside is chipping, it's faded. Let's talk about the paint for just a moment. Is that curable or incurable? Of course, it's curable. If you repaint the house, now it actually looks like a brand new house, as long as you chose the correct color schemes. All right, you got to know color schemes, but you don't want to paint a house purple or something like this with green trim. You get what I'm saying? Or polka dots on the side of the house or anything like this. You don't want to scare people away. But if you repaint the house, it now looks like a brand new house. I would say that's curable because you're able to get your money back in added value. Incurable means, an example of this, maybe termites completely destroyed the framing in the house. If you spend the money to replace all the framing in the house, you think that's curable? No, it's incurable. You're not able to get your money back in added value. If you try to sell the property for more because you replaced all the framing, people are going to think you're crazy. They're thinking the house should come with good framing. Why do I have to pay more for it? Congratulations on replacing the framing. I'm not going to pay more. I'm sorry. It's unfortunate. Functional obsolescence is poor design. We said that. Like a 5-bedroom house with 1 bathroom. If you think these don't exist, I just saw one listed for sale. It's a very old house, wood frame, built in the 20s or whatever the case may be. But sometimes you find properties with this type of functional obsolescence. It's just bad design. Now, is that curable or incurable? It's curable. Every bedroom, every bathroom you add, you're going to get your money back in added value. Versus selling it as a 5-1, you sell it as a 5-2, it's better. Sell it as a 5-3, it's better. So that would be curable. I would change one of those bedrooms into a bathroom. If it means getting an additional bathroom, of course. I'd sacrifice a bedroom just to make an additional bathroom. I'd tear down a wall and make a master suite, you know? Anyhow, another example of this is maybe inadequate amount of insulation in the property. Is that curable or incurable? I would say that's probably incurable. And here's the reason why. If the house doesn't have good insulation, what are you going to do? Rip out all the drywall? Put in new insulation? Put up new drywall? Mud it? Texture it? Repaint it? You think you'll get your money back in added value? Probably not. I'm just saying. So that could be an example of incurable physical or functional obsolescence. And the last one is called external obsolescence. This has to do with the proximity, the surrounding properties, the outside. Do you have control over external issues? No. Do you have control over what your neighbor does with their property and the condition that they keep their property? No. If you're in a homeowners association, yes, okay. You have restrictive covenants that are governed by the HOA. But let's assume that's not the case, right? Do you have control over it? Or I'll give you a better example. A house is constructed next to a train track or an airport. What are you going to do? Physically pick up the house and move it away? No, you can't. And because you have no control over it, external problems are always considered to be what? Incurable form of depreciation. Any questions about this? Just like what we learned yesterday when we calculated depreciation for IRS, that deduction that we can claim every single year for investment property, land is not what? Yes. In this method or calculating depreciation in general. Remember, depreciation is calculated on the structure, not the land. Get the land out of the equation when you're calculating depreciation. Now I get to show you an example. Here we go. Just free up some space here. Go to the handout that says cost depreciation approach across the top. The cost method. It's a very simple calculation, but step number 2 is a little bit weird. The math is simple though. It's just a weird thing that they do with calculating depreciation. Even though this method of appraising property, estimating the value of property, it could be used for any type of property. This is mainly used for commercial or industrial property. I can just tell you based on personal experience. So in the textbook, it says that it could be used for any type, but mainly it's used for commercial and industrial. Let's give an example of an industrial property that you're trying to figure out the value of. I'm going to make it up. I'll make up the details so we can see how this math works. Step number 1 is to calculate the what? Reproduction cost. As I mentioned to you already, and I put it in parentheses, reproduction cost is the cost to reproduce a structure as if it were what? Brand new. Most of the time on your exam, they're just going to tell you reproduction cost is X amount of dollars, and you don't have to think about it, calculate it, you just plug it in so you can move on to the next step. This is most of the time on your exam. But just in case you have to figure it out, let's see the worst case scenario. This is how you figure it out. You take the structure's size in square feet. Let's say the warehouse is 25,000 square feet. The warehouse is 25,000 square feet. And what you would do is multiply by the construction cost per square foot. How do you figure out this amount? On your exam, of course, they would provide you with this information. They have to give it to you. But in real life, how would you figure it out? It's really simple. All you have to do is get bids, estimates from local contractors. If I were to ask you to rebuild this warehouse as if it were brand new, what would you charge me per square foot using the same exact materials? And they can easily give you an estimate. They're in the business of giving you an estimate. And what you can do is you can get multiple estimates and calculate the average. In real life, I'm just giving you some insight, not necessarily in your textbook, but let's make it up. Let's say the average price per square foot to build a similar warehouse is $200. I'll use simple numbers. Do the math. What's the reproduction cost of the building, the warehouse itself? Was it 5 million? Is that right? Tell me if I'm right. 25,000 times 200. It's 5 million? Okay. So $5 million is our reproduction cost of that warehouse. We're going to utilize it in step number 2 and 3, but let's focus on step number 2. Calculate the accrued what? What is accrued depreciation? It's the total depreciation that has accumulated on the property over time. And the way I'm going to show you this calculation is through something called, write this down, it's called the age-life method. It's called the age-life method to calculate total depreciation that has accumulated over the years. It's called accrued depreciation. This is the weirdest calculation you've ever seen, and I'll explain why. Because it's so opinionated. You start off with identifying the effective what? Age. In your textbook, they don't describe it so you can understand what that actually is, but I simplified it for you. It's how old it what? Yes. So this is literally you standing in front of the property, this warehouse, and saying, in public records, it says it's about, 50 years old, but it only looks like it's 20 because of exceptional upkeep and maintenance. So what do you utilize for your calculation? Use 20 because of how old it looks, what you think it looks like, all right? Not how old it actually is, not the actual age, it's the effective age. It looks like it's a lot. Okay, it looks, yeah. So 20 years is what we're going to utilize for our example. But do you see how they try to trick you on your exam? They say it's actually 50, but it only looks like it's 20. And some people make the mistake of using that 50, the 50 amount. Anyhow, so you think it looks like it's 20 years old, and you take that and divide it by total economic life, or in other words, how long you think it's going to what? Last. So this is from the time it was constructed, which you can easily find in public records, to the date it's going to fall apart and crumble to the ground. And this is whatever you think that number should be, whatever amount of years. You see how opinionated this is? It's very odd, isn't it? And you can see how this might affect tremendously the value of that property based on your opinion, but that's all an appraisal is. An appraisal is just somebody's opinion. And you might have a different opinion of what you think that property is worth. Guess what? Both of us are right. That's why some people might get a second opinion of value because they don't agree with the first appraisal they got. They think their property is worth more money. Anyhow, let's make it up. Buildings could last decades. Buildings could last centuries. But let's just say you think that this building is going to last 200 years. That's just an example. We're making it up. So let's do the math. You take 20 years, divide it by 200 years, and that's easy math. You get what? 0.1. Isn't that 10%? 0.1 is 10%, correct? What we just calculated is the depreciation rate based on how old you think it looks and how long you think it's going to last. Based on that opinion, you think that this property should be depreciated by 10%. And what is that dollar figure? What is 10% of 5 million? We'll go ahead and multiply. And I could tell you, because of simple math, you just take away a zero. Isn't it $500,000? That's 10%. So all you had to do is take 10%, multiply it by 5 million, and you get 500,000. You understand why? Basically, you just estimated, you determined that the total depreciation that has accumulated over the years is $500,000. That's what you're losing in value. So let's go ahead and subtract that. If you're going to lose $500,000 because of the fact that it looks a certain amount of years and it's going to last a certain amount of years, let's take it away. And what are you left with? What's the depreciated structure value? 4.5 million, right? It's just an example. And now, what is the building sitting on? The building sitting on land. Does land have value? Can we make up what the land is worth? Just as an example, we're making it up. So we found out that the depreciated structure value is 4.5 million. And the land it's sitting on, let's make it up. Let's say the land, especially if it's a warehouse, it doesn't have to be in a desirable location. It just has to be off of a major road so you can drive a truck and pick up stuff and distribute. Maybe it's, I don't know, $200,000. Let's make it up. And when you add, what's the total property value? Yeah, $4,700,000. And that would be your answer for exam purposes. So the weirdest part to this, of course, is the accrued depreciation. And they have to give you this information in order for you to calculate, but this is how it works. The only difference is we factored in depreciation to our calculation estimate of real property value. Let's move on. I want us to move back to our textbook. And we're going to discuss now the last method or approach to estimating real property value. It's called the income approach, but officially it's called the income capitalization approach. Guess they removed that name from the textbook. I don't see it here. But look at the bottom of page 377 and you'll see some information that you have to highlight, exam purposes. Lock that in. Two separate questions, same information. Okay, let me just make sure you're not tested on anything else here. Okay. Let's go to our handouts now. Yeah, it's online as well. Yeah, if you log into your account, you'll see on your dashboard the math handouts, and then you can download all of them. You can mark them up. You can print out as many copies as you wish. I believe so. Yeah. So check this out. We see the income capitalization approach, income method. This is probably the most useful if you're working with investors, because now we're looking at what that property should be valued at based on the income it's producing and not surrounding properties and so forth. It has somewhat to do with that, but not 100%. It could be based on the investor's goal, what they want to accomplish with their property, the rate of return the investor wants to get on this property, and based on that, how much should they pay for it? It's extremely useful. I use it for personal reasons. This is my personal favorite, of course. It's very useful, and it's officially called the income capitalization approach, but unofficially, it's called the STACK formula. STACK formula. I want you to also add this note for this calculation because people make a mistake if they don't realize this. Always, when working with investors, always calculate what? Annually. Always calculate annually. If you do a monthly calculation, there's going to be an answer waiting for you. It's going to be incorrect. Investors traditionally want to know annual. Let's see how it works. You might be interested, especially if you're thinking about investing yourself. You definitely want to pay attention. In your textbook, this is page 378, line 25. We're going to use this as an example to better understand how it works. I'm going to pull data from this, and it will make sense as we start plugging it in. So on line 25, suppose your client is considering purchasing a 10-unit apartment building. You're estimating the value of property zoned for apartments. Your survey of other apartment projects of similar size and quality in the market area reveals that each of the proposed new apartments could be competitive for $665 per month. A new apartment for $665 per month. Where are those located? It must be a studio or something like that. The survey also discloses that annual vacancy and collection loss rate of 10% is typical for the area. Let's see how that works when we start plugging it in. We start off with calculating something referred to as the PGI. By the way, you need to know what that stands for. You need to know because on your exam, they'll use the abbreviation PGI. If you don't know what the abbreviation stands for, then you won't be able to calculate accordingly. Sometimes the question is, what does PGI stand for? And you have to be able to answer that. It stands for potential what? In other words, in a perfect world, what's the potential amount of money that we can make off of this? How many unit apartment building? 10-unit apartment building. Let's do the math on that. We know there's 10 units. And each one is competitive if rented at how much per month? $665 per month. Wow, that's nothing. You do the math on that, you get what? $6,650 per month from those 10 units. Not that much. But what do? Investors, do they want to know monthly or annual? Always calculate what? So you multiply by what to get annual? Multiply by 12, and that's going to give you the annual amount. Of how much? 79,800. That's your PGI. This is the potential amount of money you can make off of this 10-unit apartment building. But this isn't a perfect world. Do we live in a perfect world? No, of course we don't. So what do we have to subtract if we're living in reality? Well, we have to subtract, you see the math here, vacancy and what? Vacancy means you have empty units not producing you rental income. Collection loss means you got tenants, but they're not what? They're not paying. And they tell you in this example, in the textbook, you're going to lose how much percent annually because of it? 10%, exactly. So this is the math. You take 79,800 and you multiply by 10%. And that means we're going to subtract how much? 7,980. Do you understand why? We got 10% of 79,800. You just basically take off a zero. And this is what we're going to subtract. The next step is to add, you'll see the math symbol here, add other income. But for this example, do they mention any kind of other income that this property is producing? No. So we're going to simply add what? Zero. Donut. What could be some additional income that a 10-unit apartment building is producing? Probably not necessarily that. What about storage? What about reserve parking? What about a laundromat? What about vending machines? All of these could be, or concierge garbage pickup, something like that. All examples of additional income. But for this example, do they mention any kind of other income? No. So we add 0. And the result from subtracting, adding, we get something called the EGI. What does EGI stand for? There's a reason why I'm including the abbreviation. You have to know what it stands for. And that's actually for 2 separate questions on your exam. That's what you highlighted and wrote down. What do we get as our EGI, effective gross income? $71,820. Still not that bad. Still over $70,000, almost $72,000 a year off of this 10-unit apartment building. But look up here. What we just calculated, I'm highlighting it, is a what type of income? Gross income. Do investors want to know gross income? No. Look up here. They want to know what type of income? Net. So how do you get from gross to net? You have to subtract all relevant what? Expenses. Look in your textbook. They made it easy for us. If you go to page 379, line 1, typical expenses you can encounter per year. For what? Taxes, insurance. Look how much for management, nearly $25,000. What is that telling you? They hired a property what? They chose to be what type of owner? Starts with an A. Absentee owner. Good job. This is the first day of class. Good memory. Repairs and maintenance, reserve for replacements just in case something goes wrong, and your total expenses for the year, yeah, almost 37,000. Let's plug that in to our example, and we'll see how that works. We took 79,800. We subtracted, you see, subtracted 7,980. And that's what we got. And then we're going to subtract all relevant expenses, fixed and variable expenses, not mortgage loan payments, because one investor might pay cash, the other investor might get financing, but their qualifications are better, so they get more favorable terms. It's too much that can vary. So just leave it out of the equation. And what are you left with? What's your net? The clean money you actually put in your pocket at the end of the year. We call it an NOI. Yes, less than half, 34,830, almost 35 grand. Does that sound attractive to you as an investor? Off of a 10-unit apartment building, $35,000 clean money that you put in your pocket at the end of the year. Anybody? It's basically, you're not even taking care of the property. You hired a property what? Manager. They're taking care of it for you. So $35,000 clean money if you're buying it cash, of course, right? If you're financing, then there's a debt obligation that will consume every single month. But we're not talking about that just yet. And remember, we left out mortgage loan payments. If you want to calculate that for personal reasons, you can. But we're not going to do that for exam purposes. Leave out mortgage loan payments. I'm repeating it again and again because they're going to try to trick you with that. Now that we have the clean money you're actually putting in your pocket at the end of the year, we're going to use that income to figure out how much we should pay for the property. That's why it's called the income approach to figuring out real property value. Very useful. And that's with something called the IRV formula. Do you see IRV? I equals R times V. It's like a backwards ABC formula. We just went through all these steps to get the NOI of how much? Let's plug it in. 34,830, right? And what's our ultimate goal? What's the whole purpose of this method? To figure out the what for the property, the value. So we know that's going to be our missing variable. That means we have to fill in this variable, the overall capitalization rate. In real life, investor terminology, we call it a cap rate. Have you ever heard of a cap rate before? It's short for a capitalization rate. I'll explain why this is so important to an investor and of course why you need it for your calculation. This is how you figure it out. You have to look at similar properties that have recently sold in the market area and what they were making as clean money every single year. Based on that information, you can figure out the cap rate for your property. Check it out. It's right here. You take what similar properties were making clean money every single year, NOI, just like what we calculated for ours, and you divide it by what they recently sold for. That gives you the cap rate. It's in your textbook. They did the work for us. Check it out. It's right here. Do you see this chart? You see comparable garden apartment complex. How many comparables did they find for us? 5. Do you see A, B, C, D, and E? And look, they took what those properties were making clean money in the year and they divided it by what they recently sold for. Do you see that? And you got a cap rate for each one of them. But we have five different cap rates for those 5 properties. How do you calculate the average of 5 numbers? Well, you add them together and then you divide by what? 5. And we get an average cap rate of 0.1. 0.1 is the same thing as how much percent? 10%. I'll explain why knowing the cap rate is so important. Just for now, let's use the information, this data, to see how it works. So we filled in this missing variable, a typical cap rate for the area, similar apartment building, 10%. We have enough to figure out the what? The value. What must we do? Keyword starts with an I. We're going to what? Isolate by itself one side of the equation. What mathematical symbol separates the equation? If we know that value is on the right side of the equation and we're isolating, what do we have to get rid of? The 10%. How do you get rid of it? You slide and divide. It works every single time. So slide and divide. Take 34,830 and divide it by 10% and tell me what you get. That would mean the proposed estimated property value for this 10-unit apartment building is what? $348,300. Is that what you got? Now you can go to the investor with some really pertinent information. You tell them, hey, listen, here's the data that I collected for you so you can make an informed decision. You're going to make about $35,000 clean money every single year off this 10-unit apartment building. That's important for them to know. We can agree to that, right? What am I actually putting in my pocket? Based on that, and what similar properties have sold for, you can expect to pay no more than about $350,000 for that 10-unit apartment building. That's relevant, of course. But you still might be confused as to what the cap rate is. Let me share with you and you'll see how simple. And you'll be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't realize. It's very simple. What's that cap rate again? It's 10%. Okay, we're going to need that. As an investor, one of the most important questions to be able to answer for the investor is, how long is it going to take me to break what? Yeah, exactly. What's my ROI? Have you heard of ROI? Return on my investment annually. That's what the cap rate is utilized for. That's what it reveals to us. Check it out. Breaking even is getting how much percent of your money back? Exactly. You know this. We saw this in the previous unit. But you're capitalizing on this investment at a rate of how much percent per year? 10% is your cap rate, capitalization rate. You're capitalizing on your property at a rate of 10% per year, which means it will take the investor how long to break even? 10 years. And that's enough to make an informed decision. All of this needs to be verified, of course, but If it holds up, then yes, you have all of this information that the investor can utilize to say, yes, I do want to move forward, or no, this is not the right investment for me. But I'm asking you, would you be willing to pay $350,000 for a 10-unit apartment building, making $35,000 clean money every single year? Takes you 10 years to break even, yes or no? Anybody in here? Investors would be salivating over this opportunity, especially right now with interest rates and everything that's going on and property values. Investors are happy to make 5% ROI, cap rate every single year. Question. Yes, it's right here. This is the formula. You take what similar properties are making clean money in the year and you divide it by what they recently sold for. And that gives you the cap rate for each one. Probably wondering, okay, Michael, how do I find out what they're making clean money? You can estimate it. And you can be conservative with your calculations. But you can also call them and ask, what are you renting a 3-bedroom for in your apartment building? Write it down, right? Okay, I can estimate what expenses are typically going to be. Maybe expenses eat up about 40% of what I generate. And the area about 10%, 15% vacancy, collection loss. You can run through the same calculation for any property that you find. Anyhow, any questions here? We're actually done with this unit. Let's move on. That's unit 16. Let's move on to unit 17, which is real estate as an investment and business opportunity brokerage. We talked about this briefly in a previous unit on the first day of class and even yesterday. Actually, in unit 16, we talked about a specific type of value that we're going to see once again. Go to page 392. Page 392. Highlight this. Read through it later on tonight. We see investment terminology. It's just term and definition. By the way, in the exam prep, you have those flashcards. It tells you it's organized by unit. I did this for a reason. So if you go into unit 17, it will say, is the increase in property value over a period of time? And then if you flip over that flashcard, you'll see appreciation. Anyhow, it's really useful, especially if you're struggling with terminology. Real estate terminology is a little bit different. Assets are things of value. You don't have to write all of this down. You have a glossary in the back of your book. Cash flow is the spendable income of a business. Equity is the difference between what it's worth and what you owe. Leverage is pulling equity out of one property to purchase another. Go to the next page. Liquidity is what you can sell it for immediately, rapidly, without loss of capital. Basis is your initial cost for the investment. Capital gains and losses, we talked about that in a previous unit, as well as tax shelter, like a real estate investment is looked at as a tax shelter, protected from taxation because of all of the wonderful deductions. And then we have a REIT. Have you ever heard of a REIT? Real estate investment trust. You know what a hedge fund is? A hedge fund collects money from investors. They give you stock for your money, but they use your money to buy more stock. So you're investing in their ability to invest for you. They're publicly traded companies that have to answer to the SEC. So are REITs. So they're structured similar to a hedge fund, but they're like a real estate hedge fund. You give them money, they give you stock, but they use your money to buy real estate and not more stock. And they go big. They go after multi-unit communities, retail, shopping malls, shopping centers, office properties. Huge, because now they're crowdfunding, purchasing, acquiring these assets. And based on what those assets are producing on a monthly basis, they give out dividends. So if you're worried about investing in real estate because you're unsure and you don't want to get your shirt handed back to you, this is an alternative. REITs They do the work for you. They go after the properties. They have the knowledge. They put together the deal and they distribute profits based on what you invest. What's a benefit? A benefit of a REIT is that they're liquid. You can sell your stock at any time. If you buy the property yourself, not going through a REIT, when's the only time you can get your money out of the property? When you, or when you sell it, or gradually over time by renting it out. So it's typically when you invest in real estate, it's not liquid because you can't just, convert it into cash. But with a REIT, you can sell your stock immediately, get your money out and move on. And that leads us to risk. Risk is a chance of losing all or a part of your investment, but I have the philosophy, no risk, no what? No reward. And you have to take on a certain degree of risk. Otherwise, you can't break free from the rat race, the hamster wheel, as we like to call it. If we go to page 395, what are the advantages versus the disadvantages of investing in real estate? Well, let's talk about the advantages first. Above average rate of return. That's if the market is good and you know what you're doing. Tax advantages, if you know what you're doing. Hedge against inflation. If you put money in real estate versus letting the money sit in your bank account, because of inflation, the money sitting in your bank account allows you to buy less and less every single year because the cost of everything goes up over time, right? So your dollar is devalued because of inflation. That's why people put it in a vehicle such as real estate, because what tends to happen to property values? They go up. That's called appreciation. Exactly. So rather than losing your purchasing power by the money sitting in your bank account, you put it in real estate and your money increases, right? That's the art of investing. Leverage is only possible because of equity. And leverage is pulling equity out of one to buy another, which is a beautiful thing in our business. Disadvantages, lack of liquidity, unless you invest in a REIT. More localized market. That's why those companies that were offering cash offers. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like Zillow was doing cash offers to homeowners, or who else was doing it? Redfin, Purple Bricks, Open Door. There's a few other ones as well. OfferPad. Have you heard of this? So these Silicon Valley companies based out of California, backed by huge hedge funds, they were going out to Florida, these huge investor markets, and they're scooping up properties, but they're nerds behind a computer and they're saying, okay, I think your property is worth X amount of dollars, but there's more nuance to it. And our market is a localized market. Just because a property across the street sold for $1 million does not mean your property is worth $1 million, because across the street, it's in a beautiful neighborhood. Oh yeah, but we're in close proximity. So no, okay. We know that two neighborhoods could be within very close proximity. One could look extremely luxurious and beautiful. One could look beat up, run down, and so forth. But they're behind a computer and they're saying, oh, they're in the same location, must be worth. So they're overpaying for these properties. And they lost a tremendous hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's why they're no longer doing it. Zillow, stop giving instant cash offers for people's properties. I don't know if you realize that. Expenses associated with expertise. Well, if you don't have the expertise to invest in real estate, you got to hire somebody, and they don't work for free, including taking care of the property, active management. And if you don't have the time, resources, or knowledge, you got to pay a property manager. They don't work for free. And relatively high degree of risk. Yes, if you don't know what you're doing. But if you know what you're doing, you stick with your numbers, you don't make emotional decisions when buying property because you absolutely love it, then you'll win. You will always consistently win. But it cannot be an emotional decision. I can't stress that enough. People are like, oh my gosh, this property is so beautiful. I would live here and all this stuff. You got to take that out of the equation, because then you'll get in a bidding war and you won't stick with your numbers. I've seen that happen too many times, especially in these auction settings. People, when they get into these auctions, they'll try to outbid one another. but they don't do enough research on the property. And if you stick with your numbers, if you look into the details of the property in public records, you might notice there's a $100,000 lien attached to the property, but they never did that research. So they're just thinking, oh, I pay X amount of dollars, I win the property. Yeah, but you also inherit all the debt that comes with the property. And then and it just takes two idiots to try to start a bidding war, and they'll go after each other, and you'll see it. They're trying to better, higher bid. And you're like, oh my God, somebody's going to get left with the bag. I'm just going to pray for that person later on tonight. And eventually they do. Let's move on. Let's actually skip to page 397. We talked about this on the first day of class, lines 2 and 3, page 397, lines 2 and 3. Real estate licensees who engage in the sale, purchase, or lease of businesses are called what? Is there a separate license for this? No. All you need is, it says real estate licensees. All you need is a real estate license, active, and you can specialize in helping people with their business, selling it, buying businesses, and so forth. And they just call you a business broker. You're brokering businesses. Excuse me. You're not limited to any type. Remember, there are 5 areas of real estate, and once you get your real estate license, you can deal in all 5 areas: residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural, and businesses. So you can help somebody sell their restaurant and then at the same time help them sell their mansion. You're not limited. But of course, you want to team up with a brokerage that can help you facilitate those various types of transactions. Most brokerage companies, they specialize. They say, okay, we mainly do residential sales. We don't have a department for commercial, so we can't really provide additional guidance and support for you. And then what? You're going to be left on your own trying to figure it out? That doesn't look good for you and in that transaction, and it's probably not going to lead to a good reputation. So speak with a broker before you decide to hang your license with them and ask them, hey, do you help with facilitating other types of transactions? What if I have somebody that wants to sell their warehouse or buy one? Can I count on you to help me out with this transaction? Ask them these tough questions. They have to answer it. Otherwise, you know whether or not you want to team up with them. Okay. What we see in this chart, figure 17.2, is the similarities versus the differences of investing in real estate versus a business. There is some differences. Similarities. You might be selling real property or be involved in assignment of a long-term lease. And what license is required? Yeah, you need an active real estate license to participate in selling a single-family house or helping somebody sell their business. Florida requires it. But then we come across the differences and we see some terminology. Goodwill is something that has to be factored in to the sale of a business that you won't see with selling a single family house. Goodwill is loyalty of customers and reputation of a business. Let me repeat this. Goodwill is loyalty of customers and reputation of a business. Are those two things important to a thriving business? Of course. Could it affect the value of a business, whether it's positive or negative? Of course. Is it something that we can touch or feel? No. It's an intangible asset. You can't touch or feel customer service, reputation, but it does have a value and must be included into the price, at least if I was involved in the transaction. Oh yeah, you want to buy this barbershop, but this barbershop's been around for 50 years and they got damn near a 5-star rating with 1,000-something reviews. You are inheriting that. There's value in that, and that does affect the price. You're not just buying equipment, you're buying a business. So that's something that you have to be aware of and provide that value to your clients. But then we come across going concern value. I mentioned we would come back to this from Unit 16. Going concern value is the value of an established business versus the value of a business that has yet to be established. Okay, I'll give you an example of this because you seem confused. Two pizza shops are for sale, Mom and Pop, New York style pizza, and the other one is a Papa John's franchise. Which one is going to bring more value? Of course, Papa John's, hands down, because it doesn't matter your affinity for New York style pizza. Okay. That Mom and Pop has its own unique difficulties it has to deal with, but Papa John's has a system in place, and that's what you're buying into. People expect to go to there and receive a certain quality of good and service. You might not know what you're getting in the Mom and Pop. And what you might not realize is it might be the people that are running the business that make the business successful, and not the actual service that they're providing, because maybe that service you can get it from anywhere, or the product that they're selling, maybe you can get that from anywhere, but it's the people that care and provide a certain quality when they're delivering it to you. So that's a difficult decision, because on paper it looks like it's a thriving business, but then when you substitute management or new ownership, then it's like, what happened? This business used to be completely different. Why is it not successful? I saw it was successful for several years. So that's why systems, that's why franchising is a little bit more popular sometimes, because you can rely on something. Go to page 398. And if you look under business accounting, let's talk about these first two bullet points. Have you ever seen the TV show Shark Tank? Okay. By the way, Mark Cuban, he's leaving, right? Sold his majority share in the Dallas Mavericks, and now he's leaving Shark Tank. He's just kind of cooling off for the rest of his life, I guess. Wants to enjoy some time with the kids. Can't blame him. Billionaires, whatever. But most people love that TV show because they love to see the great ideas getting pitched, the entrepreneurs. And then a lot of the time you see these products, you're like, oh my gosh, it's such a great idea. I would buy that, or I would invest in that, or I would, or I had that idea and damn, now they're doing it, right? And you see these deals getting done, but what they're presenting verbally and what's good TV for most people is something called the income statement, which is comparing the company's income and expenses over a certain time period. So that's when the entrepreneur, they get asked that question. So what are you generating? Over what time period? They're verbally presenting the income statement. That's relevant to understanding the success that the business is going to have, or the proposed success, and there's a track record. Now, there are stories where people might fluff these numbers up and might not be so truthful, and some of those deals, actually about 40% of the deals that you see get done on TV don't end up panning out. And I watched an interview where they talked about it. It's pretty interesting, because you're like, oh my gosh, such a great idea, but it's not in any store. It's because the deal fell through. And that's most likely because these sharks that invested and they're celebrating what's not on TV, because it's just weird. Why would you watch it on TV? Is when the shark sends their team of lawyers and accountants, their army, to meticulously go through the balance sheet of that company, which not only includes the income statement, but also shows assets, liabilities, and the owner's equity. That tells you the company's complete financial position, so you can make an informed decision as an investor. So what they do is, I had a couple of friends that presented on Shark Tank, and they mentioned they had to prepare this balance sheet prior to going on the TV show, and the sharks might not review it until they get the deal done, and then they go through it, and they might find out that either it was too rich for their blood, the numbers don't make sense, or it just doesn't work out. Any questions here? Yeah, businesses could be very complex when you're selling them. I will always require 2 other professionals to accompany me within the transaction if the seller doesn't already have these 2 parties. And those other 2 parties these are licensed professionals, a CPA or some type of business accountant that is helping them manage their books. If they're doing it themselves, I need the financial documents because I know when I list it for sale and a buyer is serious, they're going to ask me for those documents. So we don't want to go backwards and say, oh, let me see if I can get those for you. No, you have to prepare it beforehand. And then also I'll have a lawyer involved because when you're transferring a business, what goes into that? You might be selling trademarks. You might be transferring licenses, the LLC, the corporation, shares in the company, and so forth. Let's move on. Valuation of a business. Do you remember these three from last unit? Comparable, cost, income. Okay. But then we come across liquidation analysis. This is one way to determine the value of a business. I've seen where businesses were purchased based on a multiple of what you can make off of liquidating all of their products. For instance, you go to an e-com business. You know what e-com is? So it's e-commerce, right? Like there's some online products or something. And they have inventory that they're turning over every so often. And you ask them, okay, well, if we were to sell all your inventory over the course of the year, what would we generate annually? And they give you that figure. And then based on that, you verify it, of course, but then you can give them a multiple of that figure. You'll say, hey, listen, you generate about $200,000 off of selling all your products throughout the course of the year. I'll give you $600,000 for your business. So what does that mean for the investor? That means the investor is going to generate $200,000 when they become the new owner, and it's going to take them 3 years to recoup all of their investment. And if there is a system in place, maybe they introduce a new product or run discounts, or maybe they can generate more revenue. But anyhow, let's move on. Go to page 400. And here are the typical steps that you would go through when selling a business, the 12 typical steps. You can read through it later on tonight. Not always have to follow these 12 steps, but this is typically what you would go through. Any questions here? We're actually done with this unit, which means we're done with our textbook. Clap it up for yourselves. We did it. Awesome. How you guys feel? Okay. We got the holidays coming up. We have a lot of personal obstacles that we have to overcome. But we have to stay dedicated. We can't mess around. We can't waste any time. You have a goal that you're trying to accomplish. You can't stop until you achieve, because the holidays are going to come through. It's just like when you get on your exercise plan, your exercise or your diet routine, and then you go off for the holidays and you're like, I'll skip a day. It's not a big deal. I'm traveling. I'm doing this and that. And then one day turns into 2 days and turns into 3 days and a week. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about how do I get back on track? Don't let it happen to you. You have to attack while you still have that ether of being in class. And you have time. These facilities are still open up until a certain date within the month when, like Christmas and so forth. So you can still take your state exam prior to the end of the year. You have the time to do so. What was the recommendation I provided? How long should you take to prepare for the class exam, the final? No more than a week to prepare for the class exam, and no longer than 2 weeks to prepare for the state exam. Who's approved? Who has the approval from the state? 2 of us? Okay, well, you had the existing. Okay, and Susie online, awesome. And, Hubert, nice. And Shirley, congratulations. So you already have the 9-digit code that allows you to schedule the state exam. But our first priority is to pass the class exam. So let's review this before you're out of my claws. And I can share once again that handout, that flyer that I provided to you. Do you remember? The 5-step guide. Yes, the 5-step guide. Wish this worked, but it doesn't. I don't know why. So weird. Anyhow, it's this one.
You?
Yeah.
I noticed that the other day. I'm like, oh, I didn't want to tell him.
It's me. Better version of me. Let's continue to this handout. 5-step guide towards getting your real estate license. Let's go through this once again so you understand what it takes to be successful beyond this class. Earn the certificate from us, pass the state exam, all of that. So step number 1, complete the pre-license course. Clap it up for yourselves. We did it. All right. Step number 2, submitting your fingerprints electronically for your CBC, criminal background check. Who's already submitted their fingerprints? Clap it up for yourselves. Awesome. I'm sorry, I'm not sharing my screen with you guys, am I? Sorry. But we've already done these things, right? Pre-license course, fingerprinting, great. All right, step number 3, submit your application electronically with DBPR. Who submitted their application? Raise your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, online. Clap it up for them, okay? If you haven't, what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? Really, you'll see right here. myfloridalicense.com. That's the Beepers website, the Florida Licensing Authority. You start on the home page, you follow these steps, and that's what it takes to submit your application electronically. When you submit, at least create an account, they'll send you a temporary password via email to reset it, and then you log back in. You can access your application by clicking on your name. Note, the application, once approved, along with your fingerprints, is valid for how many years? It's 2 years. Plenty of time. When your application and fingerprints get approved, you're going to receive an email that allows you to create an account and schedule your state exam. But let's move on to step 4, which is to pass the Cameron Academy class exam, which I know you're aspiring to do. It will be unlocked to access soon. Location is through our website. You log into your account. You click on Final Exam. And once it's available, you click that Start button, and the time will start ticking away. How many hours do we give you to complete the class exam? 3 hours. But let's talk about your access. You have how many days access? Starting from when? The first day of your scheduled class, which was what date? December 2nd? So you have essentially by January 1st. That's your cutoff time. By January 1st, that's your last day to wrap up everything with us. This means if you miss any days, you have to make it up before January 1st and take your class exam. You don't have to schedule with us. You have access to it at your convenience online through our website. We're not responsible for faulty internet connections, disconnections. Okay, remember that if you don't pass, or if you're bumped out because you don't have a reliable internet connection, or if you have a lot of distractions in the room, you can't concentrate and you had to leave and then you failed as a result of it, we're not responsible for that. You understand, right? You're adults. So find a quiet space with no distractions, reliable internet, and that's when you start the exam. And yes, we give you 3 hours to complete it, but you have maximum how many attempts? 2 attempts. What's your passing grade need to be on your first attempt? And if you don't pass, how many days must you wait before you can attempt for the second time? You have to wait 30 days to pass. Okay? You have up to a year for your second attempt, but let's not play that game. Pass on your
Michael, I
first
have a-
attempt. It's your best chance of passing, 70% or higher. And if you come back for your second attempt because you didn't pass on the first, there's no reason why you shouldn't pass on your first. But now your grade must be what for your second attempt? 75%. Question online.
Yeah, I was wondering, it says that we only have 30 days to access the material, but if we have to wait 30 days.
It
I
extends.
guess-
If you
okay,
don't pass, there's an automatic extension that happens with our system.
I get you.
Yeah. But don't be in that position because everybody should pass with 100%. Don't you know exactly what you're going to be tested on for the class exam? Shame on you if you fail my class exam. Shame, shame, shame. No, I'm just kidding. Not to add any additional pressure because I don't want to make you anxious or anything, but you know exactly what to focus on and study. And I know that. I know what I'm giving you. I'm not giving you questions and answers, but it's a stepping stone. I want you to earn the certificate because we don't give the license. The state gives a license. So I want you to walk away with enough knowledge to pass the state exam. That's what we've been doing throughout this 2-week session. You feel good? Do you feel like you learned a lot? It takes more than just being in class to retain the information. You realize that, right? You have to put forth the effort of studying. I'm not going to study for you. I've already proved myself to be in this position. You got to prove yourself. So those people that are $1 million listing and Love It, List It, Flip It, Flop It, all those TV shows you love to watch, they've earned it. You got to earn it. And nobody's going to do it for you. Nobody wants it as bad as you want it. And I don't know how long it's going to take for some people to realize that, but I'm pretty sure you understand how important that is. You have to be self-motivated. So don't rely on your classmates to show you that they passed the state exam for you to get all juiced up and motivated and lock it in. Lock it in immediately. Stop wasting time. You're fed up. You're frustrated with your current position. You feel like you're capped out in a corporate job. You feel like you're not making enough money. Well, this is your ticket. And I'm not just saying that. I taught women, woman in particular, she had no job experience, no sales experience, raising kids for the majority of her life, 20 some odd years, and finally decided to do something for herself. She decided to take a class, get a real estate license, and it changed her life. I'm not kidding with you guys. I see it all the time. And she's one of the top salespeople, has no sales experience whatsoever because it's the people business. And she knows how to treat people. And that's why people love her. There was another woman, not like I'm focusing on women, like anything in particular, but these are the ones that stand out in my mind because it just touched my heart. She took my class and then she pulled me to the side. She's like, you don't know what this means to me. I'm actually living in my car right now. She's living in her car at the time. And she has kids. She shared that with the class when she introduced herself. And she said, I can't see my kids right now because I can't have them live in the car with me. So right now at that point when she was taking class, she didn't have access to her kids. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it because I got 2 little ones. I can't even imagine not seeing them. Just think about that. She got a real estate license. I'm not saying this because I'm trying to boost up the class. You're already committed. You're here. You already paid the tuition. You completed the class. I'm telling you what's on the other side of it. It changed her life. And she started in sales and she absolutely took off. She's one of the top salespeople in the state of Florida. She's selling timeshare now. And she had no sales experience. Same thing. It's just, I see these stories all the time. What other career can you jumpstart in 2 weeks and have all of this benefit? And networking. I mean, just for you personally, you need to network. Real estate license forces you to network and build relationships with people that at least maybe you aspire to be like, right? Those are good people to have in your contact list. So just think about all these possibilities and everything that awaits you. It's there. It's at your fingertips now that we're at the end of this 2-week session. So hopefully that resonates with you. Hopefully you take this serious because it's an investment. You spent money to be here, learn this information, and hopefully that means something to you and it's not just something you're trying out. Okay? Sorry. I felt like I needed to mention that to you. Not that I mentioned that to every single class, but I felt like I needed to. If that resonates with more than one of you, great. But something told me that somebody needed to hear that message. So anyhow, let's talk about not failing the class exam. But worst case scenario, if you don't pass in your second attempt, guys, you only have 2 attempts. Don't let it happen to you. I don't want you to waste your money. Certificate will automatically be added to your Cameron Academy account. It's on your dashboard. You might have seen the spot where it's going to be located. And the certificate we issue is good for how long? 2 years is plenty of time. Application is good for 2 years. Certificate that we issue is good for 2 years. So essentially you have 2 years to pass the state exam, get your license, and take over the planet. Do it. Don't waste any time. The sooner you get your license, the more opportunities will be abundant to you. Florida state exam. Okay, this is the state exam, guys. This is the last step towards getting your license. And obviously, your application and fingerprints have to be approved before you can schedule to take your state exam. Who administers the state exam? What's the name of the company? PearsonView.com. And the only way you can make an account with them is if you get the 9-digit Florida Real Estate Application ID. And you only get that when your application and fingerprints have been approved. That's going to be sent to you via email. State exam. How much time do they give you to complete it? 3.5 hours, 75% or higher to pass, unlimited attempts. You see it right here. But every time you schedule to take your state exam, it costs money. Your results are given to you at the facility. Passes, you don't get your score. Even though I told you I got 100% on my state exam. I don't know what I got. Only fails are graded. I got a 74 on my first attempt when I was 18. Your success could start with a failure. My success started with a failure. Just wanted you to hear that. Okay. Reschedule after 24 hours have passed. You can even pay to review the tests you failed. There's a fee for that. That's why I said pay. And you have to do that within 21 days of the fail date. Any questions here?
I have a quick question.
Hold on one second. Online, just give me a second. There's somebody in class that started asking the question first. What was the question? Yes. So the question is, when you pay to review the test, if you fail, worst case scenario, if you fail. It's not worse, but anyhow, you get what I'm saying. They give you an hour and a half to look over the test you failed, the actual test you failed, see the questions you got wrong, and so you can identify the mistakes you made, because you don't get that normally. If you don't pass your state exam, they give you this printout that says what your score is, and they say you missed X amount of questions from whatever unit it was. Unit 5, you got 5 out of 12 correct, but you want to see the ones that you made mistakes on. You're like, really? I really studied that unit. That's what you get when you review. And you're like, oh my gosh, I thought I answered that correctly, but this one makes more sense now. I'm reading it the second time. And let me share something with you about that. Before I answer your question online, I got you. Don't worry. I didn't forget. We give you 3 hours to complete the class exam, right? The state gives you 3.5 hours, a little bit more time. Most people finish early. I'm going to tell you right now. Most people do, statistically. Start preparing mentally right now to keep your butt in that seat for the full time that they provide to you. If you finish early, great, go back, review. Don't change because you're second guessing yourself. That's called overthinking. Some people, they struggle with that. I'm not telling you to go back and change. Your first instinct is your best instinct, right? So stick with that. Stick with your gut feeling about it. I'm telling you to go back and look for errors. Questions that you didn't see, it says not, or false, or true, and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even see that. One word can change the entire meaning of the question or the answers that are provided. So be aware of that. Even the one that we've been preaching, residential versus non-residential. Do you remember how it changes? The rules don't apply to non-residential? Okay. Online.
For the Cameron Academy class exam, how do we download like the Pearson Proctor thing that you were talking about? Or
It
is
should
that
be
just
on the materials tab.
Oh,
You
okay.
log in. Yeah,
Gotcha.
if you log in, I don't know if you've seen the materials tab, but it should be on your dashboard, and then you click
Okay.
on the course you have access to, and then you'll see all the materials. And one of
Okay.
those is going to be that candidate handbook. Yes.
I have a question too, Michael.
Hold on one second.
Yeah.
No, the exam prep is a subscription. It's $10 a month. How many months is it going to take you to pass the state exam? It's like, it's the cheapest exam prep that you can get on the market. I'm telling you, hands down. Most charge like $150, $200 to have access to an exam prep. I want to make it cheap. I want you to pass. It's just going to add to a better reputation for us. Yes. The exam prep, scan your scan in front of your textbook or on the notepad, the QR code. That's the exam prep. All right, online. Somebody had a question.
Yeah, I was curious, how soon can we schedule us out for both the class exam and the, are you gonna let the state know if we pass the class exam and before we can register?
It's a good question. It's a good question. So remember, the class exam, it's all automated. So you'll be able to access the class exam by, I think, earliest is Saturday. Okay. And it will be unlocked. You click on that button, start. You don't have to schedule. I mean, you have to schedule your life. So that way you set your time aside, at least 3 hours to focus on this, taking this exam, quiet space, no distractions, reliable internet. The certificate that we issue is automated as well. It goes to your dashboard. You download or print it out. You have to bring a copy of that with you to the state testing facility, Pearson VUE testing facility. That's how you get proof. So it has information about our school, our signatures, and so forth that you show to the testing facility, and that's what allows you to sit for your state exam. Now, one thing I want to mention to you, those of you who registered for class but did not complete your profile, you need to complete it and be as accurate as possible, because this is the information that's auto-populated on your certificate. So if you log in and it says, oh, complete your registration, and you just keep on ignoring it, don't ignore it anymore. Complete it, because that's what appears on your certificate. All right? And make sure it matches your ID, because that's how they verify. When you go to the testing facility, they say 2 forms of signature ID. Driver's license, oh, your address matches the certificate. The address is on your certificate, by the way. Your phone name as it matches on your ID, and the information that they receive from the state. Everything must correlate. Okay. Any other question online?
How do you get your certificate to the testing center if you're choosing to do it remotely?
Oh, you just download it and then you upload it. Download it from us and upload it onto their system. So what they do, if you're going to take your state exam remotely at home, they make you download a software that basically locks down your computer, and you can't use any software on your computer except for the testing software. And then they say you have to have a webcam, you have to have audio, and then they'll have on that platform, upload a picture of your ID, upload, and it's all connected to you use your cell phone and your laptop. So you can take a picture of your ID, it connects to their app, it's all interconnected.
Because she looked away.
Yeah, if you take your eyes off of the screen, they could fail you. If you read your questions, they'll tell you all of this. If you read your questions aloud, they could fail you. If you grab your cell phone, obviously they could fail you with that. There's a few other things. Yeah, it's just, you have to make sure there's nothing on the walls. It's just highly regulated. But if you're, where are you at? Jackson? You said Jacksonville?
Yes.
Where were you at? Jacksonville, they have a testing facility, like a physical facility in Jacksonville.
Okay.
Yeah. They have locations all over the nation,
Okay.
all over the state, all over the nation. So don't think like you have to take your exam in Orlando. No, you could take it in Winter Garden, Lakeland, Melbourne, all over the state. I had a student, they traveled all the way to Gainesville to take their state exam because they wanted to take their state exam as soon as possible. And this was the closest availability that they could find. 2-hour drive from Orlando, and they passed. It was worth the investment for them. It was actually my high school coach, my high school varsity basketball coach. He took class with me, and then he told me about him traveling to Gainesville for the state exam, not the class. So the question she has is, you have to make an appointment. I say yes for the state exam, but not the class exam. Any questions here? Yes. So somebody has a password and she could share that with you, but you can always, with the email that she used, you just tell her the email and you could reset your password. That's not an issue. And update your account. Any other questions? No other questions? Online?
Michael,
Yes.
yeah, I just wanted to mention that I did put a note in the chat, my number. If anybody wanted to join the chat, can you feel free to share my number?
Well, you did it
Oh, okay.
once.
It's,
But Hubert, you're making the WhatsApp group, right?
correct.
Okay.
So if you,
Okay, so, oh, you made one?
I already made
You already
one,
made one.
right?
Okay, somebody in class made one, I guess. And you already got the
Oh,
chat.
okay.
All right, cool.
Okay. Well, we can join the chat too if they want. We just don't have the number.
Yes, Andre, you're here as well. She took you got everybody. So she got a picture of everybody that put their number and name in the chat.
Perfect. Hey, Michael, would it be
Okay, yeah.
possible to get your number too? I had something I wanted to talk to you about.
You can email me. Is it on the educational side or is it on the investment side?
Investment side.
Okay, I'll put it in the chat.
Is it this one?
There you go.
All right. Yeah.
So we have a couple of traditions at Cameron Academy. Number one, did you guys enjoy class? Okay, did you feel like you learned a lot? Okay,
One out of 5.
thank you so much. It's my pleasure. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. Now that you guys are feeling so generous, take out your cell phones real quick, if you don't mind. Can you do me a favor? Yes, please. If you don't mind. Who has, you don't have to take a photo of me if you want to. I don't know what you're going to do with it. AI is crazy these days. So who has Google Maps? Not like the maps that come automatically in your iPhone, but Google Maps. Anybody have, oh, you don't use Google Maps? Oh, you got to get Google Maps. All right. So, do you use Yelp? Okay. Please. I'm not asking for 5 stars, but it really does make a difference. It does make a huge difference. And I appreciate it. If you could help us out, please, if you have Google Maps, search Cameron Academy like you're looking for driving directions. I know it sounds weird, but this is the way that the review really sticks. Because if you go to Safari, Google.com, or your Chrome browser, it just doesn't, for whatever reason, it doesn't stick. But I notice Google Maps, it works. You could try it. You could try it on Google.com if you want. Okay. But yes, if you can go to, listen, you don't have to write a page or anything, but I do appreciate it. And I do read them. And I like to brag on you guys as well. So please, can you make me a promise? Just this little promise. Besides this, and I appreciate you helping me out with the review. Can you stay in touch? And I'm not trying to be corny or anything, but I'm saying, like, when you pass your state exam, can you let me know? Okay. Like that, actually, it does make my day. So if you could let me know and send me a selfie. Yeah. You could, Michael@CameronAcademy.com. If it's any school related stuff, Michael@CameronAcademy.com or support@CameronAcademy.com. Either one of those, I can see it. So send me a selfie of you with the pass document from the state testing facility. If you can, please. And then when you make your first commission check, send me another selfie. And if you're feeling generous, take me out to a fancy, wallah, come on. Shukran, I appreciate it. Shukran aktir. Yeah. Listen, students bring me deals all the time. If you know about discount real estate, I'm all ears. I mean, I'm doing deals all the time. I'll buy I buy wholesale deals as well. Yeah, if the numbers are right, just like, don't be mad at me if I'm brutally honest about the property. I can't control the numbers, but I'm gonna look up the numbers and I'll tell you if it's worth my time or not. I try to get as close as I can to 45% of ARV as possible. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, there's a market for that, but I get a little bit more aggressive because I go in with the intention of renovating. Yeah, I'm all over the place. Michael said, most people know me by Michael Cameron. Cameron is my middle name, but my last name is actually Sadawi. It's Michael Sadawi. So if you look up Michael Sadawi or Michael Cameron, you'll see me. My background is I'm half Philistini. I'm half Palestinian. And then my mother's American, my father's Palestinian, and that's where Sadawi comes from. Mount Sinai. Huh? Yeah, so if it's like school-related stuff, you could just email me at michael@cameronacademy.com or or admin@cameronacademy.com. And then for investment stuff, it's right here. I put it here on the chat. It's investwithcrg@gmail. Don't send me any spam, please. Don't put me on any email list or whatever, automated email list. This is like a fresh email. And you just like, you take pride in like not having spam and a fresh email. And then you're like, I didn't sign up for anything. How am I getting these spam, whatever. So last tradition before I let you guys go into the world and conquer. Everybody arise. Online students, you guys can stay put, but tilt your camera down so I can see your faces, because Dominique, you're cut off. Shirley, you're cut off. Want to see all your wonderful faces. And I want you to push in your chairs. Everybody push in your chairs. And I want you to accumulate with each other side by side in this first row where Darlene is. Please, shoulder to shoulder, get nice and cozy, get together. Yes. Get close. This is the last day of class, all right? So are we excited? Can you scoot over a little bit so we can even it out? Awesome. Yeah, I'm all about symmetry. I am going to get you, because I'm going to take it like this. So I'm going to get them online, and then I'm going to get you behind it. So let me just close this chat real quick, and let me make it full screen. You guys can stay exactly where you are. However, I'm going to get you guys to smile, all right? And we're going to do a test run, okay? Here we go. I'm going to brag on you guys on social media. All right. On the count of 3, I want you guys to say, care, right? And the reason why is because Cameron Academy of Real Estate, we care about you, okay? I'm corny, just deal with it. So here we go. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. It's the last day of class. The enthusiasm. We can move this chair out of the way. All right. All right. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, I don't know. All right, now we're going to do a pose. Ready? Get funky. 1, 2, 3. That's the pose? Come on, come on. It's almost Christmas time. The holidays are coming up. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Awesome. I got it. Cool. Tag Cameron Academy. I'll share it with you. We'll post it and then tag yourself, and then that's another way you can stay in contact with your fellow classmates, social media, and please stay in contact with each other. Push each other. If you see your fellow classmate is struggling with getting their priorities straight, push them off the cliff. You could do it. All right. With that being said, last day of school, push your chairs, clean up your mess, drive safe. God bless. Happy holidays. I'll see you in the future.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
My pleasure. Take care. Stay in
Thank-
contact.
Good night.
What was that? Michael@CameronAcademy.com. Yes, yeah.
Thank you for everything.
Of course. My pleasure. I appreciate it. Thank you. Likewise. Cheers. Enjoy your holiday. Yes. Take care. Oh, and I didn't forget about you.
Thank you.
Yes.
I also kind of wanted to show you that letter. I emailed that letter to you, or should I email it to you?